Chapter 151, Holy Light. Using magic to produce a grand knight, even if it was just a small part of its power. This was definitely a plan that other wizards would not even dare to think of. This was not something that could be described as crazy. It was simply a fantasy. But Heath was different. He had already grasped the power of a grand knight, and he knew enough about knights. There were countless training plans for knights in his mind. If he were to put it all together, not to mention a real grand knight. However, he could still borrow some of this power. In the future, he would need a lot of people to fight with other wizards for territory and rule the territory. He could not do it alone. Therefore, for the next period of time, Heath stayed in the center of the tower and devoted himself to this research. He analyzed the strange runes, analyzed his own blood cells, and tried to combine them with various materials, starting from spells, potions, training methods, and so on. He analyzed, judged, dialectically, guessed, and tried, and failed. In the face of failure, he was not discouraged or compromised in the slightest. He quickly summarized his experience and then threw himself into the next experiment. He concluded, tried, failed again, and concluded again. All the food was sent to the tower by the servants. After he was full, he continued the experiment. When he was tired and sleepy, he lay on the experiment table and closed his eyes for a while. When he woke up, he continued the experiment. In the true sense, he forgot about sleep and food, day and night. When one did what they liked to do and wanted to do, they would not feel tired no matter how much energy they put into it. This was the state that Heath was in right now. Time passed through his experiments one after another. Hundreds, thousands of times. Finally, when he did not know how many times he had failed, Heath finally developed some results. In the stone tower. Ha! 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 Some maniacal laughter sounded. In front of the stone window, Heath was holding a potion bottle in his hand. The bottle was flowing with a golden viscous liquid, shining under the sunlight. Heath let out a long sigh. Finally, there's something. This was the original cell fluid that he had cultivated using his own blood cells as the blueprint. Its effect was similar to the golden blood, and it was also able to greatly improve the physique of ordinary humans. The difference was that after absorbing this original cell fluid, it could also give people a trace of the power of a grand knight. Although it was still far from being comparable to a real grand knight, it was still a great improvement compared to the original version of the knight. Other than that, Heath placed the potion bottle on the wooden table and picked up a sheepskin scroll on the table. On the scroll, there were some strange figures, postures and patterns, and there were also words and annotations on the side, like some kind of secret manual. This was a secret manual for the cultivation of knights. During the research process, Heath found that this power of a grand knight had a special connection with the secret manual for the cultivation of knights. Therefore, he focused on this aspect during the experiment. There were so many secret manuals for the cultivation of knights in his mind that he could not count them all. He had extracted at least 90% of the secret manuals for the cultivation of knights in the entire Underdark Tresia. After synthesizing a large number of secret knight techniques, he wrote a new cultivation secret technique that was compatible with the power of a grand knight. After taking the cell original fluid, he could use this secret technique to cultivate and absorb the power of a grand knight in the cell original fluid to a greater extent. In the future, he could combine this power with the cell original fluid to a greater extent. Moreover, if a knight was willing to sacrifice his life to burn his own life force, he could even have the power of a grand knight in a short period of time. Next. Touching his chin, Heath looked at the cell origin liquid and the knight's secret manual in his hand. Heath said emotionally, "It's popularized." After that, Heath named the liquid cultivated from his cell origin liquid the Blood of God, and named this knight's secret manual the Chapter of Light. And the trace of grand knight's strength that was produced from the combination of the two after cultivating was decisively named by him. Holy Light. A few days later, in the Long-Hair Princess Tower. Sunlight fell into the hall through the cross-shaped window on the outside of the tower, interweaving into several beams of light in the hall. In the spacious hall on the first floor, several men in nail-studded leather armor were standing under the sunlight, standing there as if they were waiting for something. Whoosh! Whoosh! Soon, the sound of a gust of wind could be heard. Along with this gust of wind, a figure slowly descended from the top floor of the tower. The men all knelt on one knee on the ground. One of their hands was placed on their chests. Their gazes were focused on the figure that had descended. Their gazes were incomparably pious. Lord Oracle! A sonorous and powerful voice reverberated in the tower. Looking at the pious men on the ground, Heath's expression was a little awkward. He did not know whether he should praise his ability to deceive others or despise himself for being a great liar. After Heath's theory was put forward, some people did not believe it, while others were watching. Some people believed his theory and went crazy. The men in front of him were those who went crazy. After Heath's sermon, they really believed in the existence of the God of Light and immediately chose to join Heath's holy church. During this period of time, as long as he arranged for them to do things in the name of the God of Light, regardless of whether it was right or wrong, they would do everything in detail and try their best to complete it. It was not an exaggeration to say that if necessary, they would even dare to kill a wizard. Heath raised his hand. Get up! The men stood up in a flash and stood to the side. They held their heads high and puffed out their chests, their eyes filled with fanaticism. For some reason, Heath felt his scalp go numb. Mass production of these religious madmen who were not afraid of life and death and were willing to die for the cause was indeed terrifying. So, you must be careful in everything. You must never let things get out of your control. Quietly reminding himself in his heart, Heath asked a square-faced knight, Spencer, how are you? Have you recovered? The few men standing here were the knights who had a brief conflict with him in the manor and had even fought with him for a while. After Duke Dylan restrained them that day, in order to interrogate Heath, he only cut off their limbs and turned them into human sticks. He did not end them. Such injuries were incurable among humans, but it was not a big deal for wizards. Now was the time to use people, so Heath found suitable limbs to reattach them. Spencer said, thanks to the mercy of the God of Light, Spencer is safe and sound. He can continue to serve our Lord at any time. The other apprentice knights also said firmly, we will listen to the call of God at any time. Heath nodded, then took out the blood of God and the chapter of light, and began to introduce, this is the blood of God and the chapter of light. Wouldn't they be afraid of the humans rebelling if they were given such a deadly thing? This problem was far from being considered. The power of wizards was far beyond what Heath had come into contact with so far. With his research results, they could at most be compared to magic puppets and alchemy puppets. It would be fine to help him fight for territory, but to overthrow the entire world and overthrow the rule of the wizards. That was not just a small difference. He would have to at least develop a large number of real grand knights. Of course, in order to be on the safe side, Heath still made a lot of backdoors. First, the blood of God was cultivated from his cell's origin liquid. It was ineffective on him. Even if things were to get out of his control in the future, it would not affect him. Second, this technique was only in his hands. In the future, he was not going to share it with anyone. Even if other wizards wanted to crack it, they would have to reach the Grand Knight realm and master a large number of knights' secret cultivation methods. He was not afraid of crazy people researching it in reverse. Third, and most importantly, whether it was the blood of God or the chapter of light, he had hidden countless incantations. He only needed to arrange the specific incantations and runes to make the knights who learned it burn into ashes. Through these three things, the power he had created was firmly in his hands. As long as he could control this power, it would not be an enemy of the entire wizard class. As for ideology, wizards were mostly pragmatists. As long as there were enough benefits, they did not care about letting the ants rule the world. Of course, Heath did not deny that it was a bit risky to play this way. If the wizards were vigilant and decided to kill him before he became stronger, then he would really have to run away with a bucket. However, everyone was busy fighting. Heath felt that this was a good opportunity to secretly develop. It would not take long. As long as he was given 10 years to develop, he would be able to accumulate enough capital to stand in the Underdark Tresia. As for whether he should rope in other wizards to share this power, or whether he should fight for hegemony, the initiative would at least be in his hands. Taking risks was indeed risky, but it was undoubtedly a shortcut to speed up the establishment of his own territory. In short, the matter was settled. This summer, in the northwest of the forest border, a newly established religious organization, the Church of Light, established its first military force, the Knights of the Church, also known as the Holy Knights. Although he was full of confidence in his research results, Heath never expected that his investment of only a few days would bring him a return. 1 month after the establishment of the Holy Knights, Spencer, whom he appointed as the leader, went to find Heath, and the first thing he said was to make Heath dumbfounded. Spencer said, Lord Oracle, our people just caught a group of blasphemers outside the city, awaiting your punishment. They are a group of wizards. Chapter 152, Acquaintances. Lord Oracle, our people just caught a group of blasphemous sinners outside the city and are awaiting your punishment. They are a group of wizards. When he heard Spencer's report, Heath was in the temple discussing some of the contents of the story of God with Marius. This sudden news stunned him. After being stunned for 2 seconds, he asked, "Wizard? Are you sure?" Spencer said with certainty, "Yes, my lord." Then, he learned the whole story from Spencer. After gaining control of Calara City, Heath issued a series of orders to restore order, including strengthening patrols, guards, and the prohibition of weapons, etc. Every person who entered the city gate had to undergo a strict search, including a body search. Today, a group of strangers came to the city gate, attempting to use the spiritual spell hypnosis to avoid the guards and enter the city. Normally, it was difficult for ordinary people to guard against hypnosis, but today, a few soldiers stationed at the city gate had coincidentally absorbed Heath's blood of God and learned the chapter of light. The blood of God contained a trace of the power of a grand knight, which could improve a knight's spirit and willpower. Therefore, although the few soldiers were hypnotized first, one of them woke up halfway and quickly woke up his companions. Then, the group of people had a conflict with the spellcasters. Spencer was patrolling nearby, so he brought people to subdue them. Heath frowned and asked, "Where are they?" Spencer said, "Currently, they're being held in the dungeon." Heath said, "Bring me there." Along the way, Heath was thinking about where this oddity came from. Although the holy knights that he nurtured were indeed stronger than ordinary knights, they were actually not that strong. To be able to be subjugated by ordinary people, the standard of these apprentices was indeed quite weak. Soon, they arrived at the dungeon. Just as they came down from the stairs, Heath heard a series of voices coming from below. At the same time, a few spiritual fluctuations belonging to the same species were transmitted from below. "Are we dreaming? This is simply a dream. We were actually captured by humans and locked in the dungeon. Heavens! Can you shut your mouth? If it wasn't for your shit like hypnosis, we wouldn't be here. Paul, hurry up and think of something. This place is terrible, I don't want to stay here. SHH, I think someone's coming. This feeling, it's the smell of a spellcaster. Such strong elemental fluctuations. Could it be that we've met a wizard?" The voice came to an abrupt end. Walking through the corridor, under the light of the dancing torches, Heath saw that there were about 5 or 6 people in the cage through the iron railings. There were men and women. All of them were apprentices, and the strongest one was only at the level of an advanced apprentice. While Heath was sizing them up, the people inside were also looking at him. The spiritual sense made them feel like they were the same kind of people from Heath's body. The strong elemental fluctuations gave them a fright. One of the pretty girls seemed to have suddenly noticed something, and her eyes suddenly widened as she looked at Heath. She exclaimed, "It's you." They seemed to know Heath. With her scream, the others recognized him. The magic genius of Shadow Tower. Black-haired Heath. It's him. Why is he here? Heath was stunned. Could this person who was captured be someone he knew? A while later, in the chapel of Calara Temple, Heath and Marius were discussing the etiquette of the Holy Church. Knock, knock, knock. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. The door to the room was open. Spencer appeared at the door with a few young men beside him. They were the group of apprentices who had been locked up in the dungeon previously. At this moment, they had changed into clean clothes and it was obvious that they had freshened up. Spencer bowed and said, "Sir, I've brought them for you." Heath nodded and said, "Go down." "Yes." Spencer left, and the apprentices walked into the room. The apprentices walked into the room. Heath took the initiative to greet them and said generously, "Welcome, friends of the Light Cult." These apprentices were none other than the small wizard organization he had met once in the Underdark Tresia and had saved once by Heath, the Light Cult. Perhaps it was because they were too embarrassed, the apprentices all looked rather embarrassed. They had been saved by Heath twice in a row. It was fine that there were dark wizards last time, but this time they were captured by a few humans and locked up in the dungeon. This was the biggest joke in the wizard world. In the end, the girl stood up and said, "Hello, Apprentice Heath, we meet again. I'm so glad to meet you here. I'm Celia. We met last time. Do you remember?" The girl was about 16 or 17 years old. She was not particularly gorgeous, but her facial features were very delicate. Her big eyes were sparkling as if they could speak. Overall, it made Heath involuntarily think of the little sister next door when he was a child. She was just as pure and cute. Heath smiled and said, "I'm glad to be able to save you, miss." This girl was the one he saved from the dark wizard. Celia's face was slightly red and she looked very shy. She avoided looking at Heath's eyes and said in a panic, You. Thank you. No way. Why are you so flirtatious?" While Heath was surprised, a brown-haired boy came forward. He bowed to Heath and introduced himself, "Hello, Apprentice Heath. I am the Wizard Master of the Light Cult, Paul Xavier." Heath retracted his gaze from the girl and replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir." Pausing for a moment, he asked in surprise, "Pardon me for being presumptuous, but are you the Wizard Master?" As far as he knew, the Wizard Master of the Light Cult should be a peak-level advanced apprentice. He was about 80 years old and came from the Aurora family. He had never heard of Paul of the Xavier family before. Paul explained, "My teacher had an accident 2 years ago. Before he passed away, he appointed me to take over the position of Wizard Master." As he spoke, he took out a badge. This was a badge issued by the ruler of darkness, and only the Wizard Master had it. Paul said, "Because the current ruler's candidate is vacant, the scepter and badge haven't been replaced yet. The name of my teacher is still on it, but the spiritual brand inside is already mine." He activated the badge as he spoke. The Wizard Master's badge could only be activated by the Wizard Master's own spiritual power. The fact that he could activate the badge clearly showed that he had received the previous Wizard Master's approval. For a moment, Heath's eyes lit up. He never thought that the benevolent act of the last time would give him such a big gift. This was really being sent a pillow when he was sleepy. Paul once again bowed seriously to Heath and said, "We haven't had the time to thank you for what happened last time. Thank you for your help. If it weren't for you, the Light Cult would have been buried in my hands. It was too embarrassing to let the humans finish the job today, so there was no need to mention it." The other apprentices also bowed, "Thank you, sir." Heath shook his head and smiled. "It's nothing." Paul continued, "We of the Light Cult will always remember your kindness. If you need our help in the future, you can come to me anytime." Heath suddenly said, "That's good. I have something I need to trouble you with." Paul was stunned. Although he was not being polite, he did not expect Heath to be so direct. He quickly said, "Please go ahead." Pausing for a moment, he added, "If it's within my ability, I won't decline." Heath said, "Of course." Then, he asked excitedly but completely out of Paul's expectations, "I want to ask you, your Light Cult. Are you still looking for people?" Chapter 153, Cooperation. Currently, there were too few people available. Not only would it consume a lot of energy to train them from scratch, but it would also take a lot of time. If he could absorb a wizard organization with a complete system, he would definitely be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. In addition, this was also inevitable for future competition. The wizard world was a world where the ranks were solidified. Although the Underdark Tresia was currently in full swing, those who could contend for hegemony were all wizard organizations certified by the ruler of the Underdark Tresia. The leaders were all from various wizard families. It was a civil war between pure bloods. He, a muggle from outside, wanted to stick his flag in. Focusing on the heretics was something that could be predicted. Paul was stunned. "Recruiting." Heath nodded and continued, "It's like this." After saying that, he briefly recounted the whole story, and then let Marius, who was next to him, fill in a part of the story. "The Lord loves the world. No matter what your previous identity is, as long as you join the Lord and believe in the Lord devoutly, you will be able to receive the Lord's mercy in the future and go to the kingdom of God." Marius finished the story with his eyes shining. After these few months of settling down, he had brought himself more and more into the role of God's pious servant. After listening to their stories, the disciples of the Light Cult twitched their lips. What a good guy, what a good guy. In this chaotic era, others would either fight for resources or territory, or cultivate in seclusion. This guy actually came to the human world to secretly develop his power. Heath asked, "How is it? Are you interested?" The apprentices all looked at Paul. Paul obviously didn't want to get involved in this. He said with a troubled expression, "Our Light Cult only has so few people. I'm afraid. They had fled to the human world to avoid conflict. If they joined Heath, wouldn't that involve them again? However, before he could finish his words, two voices sounded in the room. I think it's fine, Paul. Don't we also need a place to stay? Celia said. Celia is right, Paul. I think this Holy Church of Light is very interesting. Another apprentice who looked a little mature spoke excitedly. Paul glanced at these two people and didn't say anything. Did they really not know whose territory this was? Even if the blood source was destroyed in the beginning, it would still be the fruit of the victor in the future. Were they really not afraid of death if they messed around here? Perhaps they saw through Paul's concerns. Marius took the initiative to explain confidently, Sir Paul, you don't have to worry about anything. My Lord is the only true God in this world. Any evil person who blasphemes the power of God will only end up in destruction. He explained everything that happened in the manner in detail. The apprentices who heard the story widened their eyes and looked at Heath as if they had seen a ghost. Paul said in surprise, Wait a minute, you just said. Heath rose into the air, and he just rose up without taking anything? Is that so? Everyone became a little nervous, and there was a hint of awe in their eyes. Flying without any magical equipment. This was a power only wizards had. Could it be that this black-haired genius of Shadow Tower had already advanced to a wizard? But how could this be? The last time they met, he was only an intermediate-level apprentice. Sensing that everyone's mood had changed, Heath explained, I met a grey wizard in the magic bug forest and bought a special flying spell from him. Only advanced-level apprentices can use it. The matter of advancing to a wizard was a huge one, so Heath obviously could not spread it around. There was no need to keep a low profile. After listening to Heath's explanation, Paul and the others calmed down. Paul wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, You scared me. I told you, how could there be such a strange thing in the world? He seemed to have thought of something when he said this. He opened his mouth wide and looked at Heath as if he had seen a ghost. Wait a minute, what did you just say? That spell of flight can only be used by advanced apprentices? Is that what you said? Heath nodded. Yes. It was just a simple answer, but it instantly caused a sensation. No way, how long has it been since he advanced to an advanced apprentice? Celia, didn't you say that he has only been in the wizard world for 5 years? The news you heard is wrong, right? This is true. Advancing to an advanced apprentice in 5 years. This is a monster, right? I heard that he is also a muggle. Looking at the shocked apprentices in front of him, they was astonished. It was not the first time he had enjoyed similar treatment in the past few years because of the rapid advancement speed, but it was the first time it happened from apprentices from a foreign organization. Heath asked, Have we met somewhere else before? Why did these apprentices seem to be very familiar with him? Haha. We haven't seen you before, but we've heard a lot about you. Our ears were getting calloused. The apprentices seemed to have a deep meaning in their words. As they spoke, they glanced at Celia from time to time. The latter lowered her head and did not speak, her face red. Heath did not know that his heroic rescue of the damsel in distress had left a deep impression on Celia. After that, the girl had collected and inquired about Heath through various channels. That was also why they knew so much about Heath. Usually, Heath did not pay much attention to it. In fact, his fame in the Underdark Tresia had far exceeded his expectations. Cough. Paul coughed. No matter what, he had to protect his sister. He changed the topic. Let's continue talking about business. At this point, he paused for a moment. Although he was still hesitating, his attitude had clearly changed. Your Excellency's suggestion. Everyone was a wizard master, so who would not have some ambition? How could Paul be willing to be chased around like a stray dog? How could he not want to take back the territory that the Light Cult had lost? It was just that his strength was not as good as the others. In the current situation, it was not easy for him to preserve the fire seed of the wizard organization. However, the appearance of Heath gave Paul a glimmer of hope. If he could really establish a cooperative relationship with this genius with extraordinary strength. Paul had seen his strength with his own eyes. He was able to cast such a powerful spell when he was still an intermediate-level apprentice. After thinking for a moment, Paul replied, How about this? I'm sorry about your suggestion. I can't give you an immediate reply, but I hope that I can learn more about your holy church before making a decision. Is that okay with you? Heath said confidently, I believe that you will definitely make the right choice. Perhaps it was really fated. Not long after the light cult came to Kalaru, there was news from the Underdark Tresia that the Red Devil's blood was ambushed when they were fighting for a resource land with the Starry House. They were all wiped out. The day after the news came back, Paul agreed to Heath's suggestion. The light cult and the Holy Church were officially cooperating. With the light cult joining, many of Heath's problems were easily solved. The originally empty senior members of the Holy Church had a suitable candidate in an instant. The first was the Pope of Light. The leader of the entire Holy Church in Heath's organization structure was handed over to an apprentice of the light cult called Peter. He was the one who had previously expressed his interest in the Holy Church to Paul. Firstly, his major happened to be light magic. Secondly, his appearance was kind and amiable. Pushing him to the front would be beneficial to the Holy Church's propaganda. For this reason, Heath specially prepared an aging potion to age his appearance by a few decades. Second was the Holy Maiden of Light. This choice was originally Heath's biggest headache because in his framework, the Holy Maiden of the Church of Light needed to have a pure body. However, the lifestyle of a witch. Looking for virgins in this field. Heath had only seen 2 virgins in the past 5 years. But sometimes, when luck came, there was nothing he could do to stop it. The original wizard master of the Church of Light did not like women. He thought that sex was not helpful for cultivation, so he asked his apprentices not to mess around. And because of that, the virginity of the only 2 female apprentices in the team were still intact. There was no need to hesitate about the 2 options. After a simple discussion, everyone chose Emily as the Holy Maiden of Light. Heath originally wanted to let Paul's sister, Celia, take up the position, mainly because of her image and temperament. However, her personality was too out of character and was opposed by everyone, including herself. There was also a small incident in the process of choosing the Holy Maiden. After hearing about the ascetic deeds of the Church of Light, Marius proposed to write this into the doctrine and set up a complete set of loyalty for the people, including monogamy. However, the proposal was opposed by most people. The disciples of the light cult used to be ascetic only because they had no choice. Now that they could finally let go of themselves, wasn't it a joke to ask them to go back to their original forms? The proposal was temporarily shelved. The Pope of Light, the Holy Maiden of Light, then the Cardinal, the religious court of inquiry. The main members of the organizational structure of the Holy Church were basically filled. However, the manpower was still a little tight. Even Heath had been given the position of the red-robed archbishop. According to his original intention, he only wanted to be a behind-the-scenes driver to split the money. He had never considered such a front-stage position. In short, the organizational structure of the members of the Holy Church had finally taken shape. The entire Holy Church could be considered to have taken shape. With all the members, the Holy Church could start to operate. Recruiting people, discussing etiquette, perfecting the teachings. The details began to develop rapidly according to Heath's original plan, and the Holy Church became more elegant day by day. The days passed by quickly, and the end of summer celebration arrived. At this point, the Holy Church founded by Heath would also welcome its official opening ceremony. Chapter 154, Mass. In Kalaru city, the sun was shining. The sun had yet to rise. The Cathedral of Kalaru. The old stone temple had been replaced by a majestic hall. In the square in front of this hall, there was a sea of people. After several months of relentless publicity and spread, the Holy Church had gathered a group of believers who believed in it. Under the lead of this group of believers, more people gathered around it. Since last night, a crowd had gathered around the cathedral. By this morning, it had already completely surrounded the place. The crowd was like a sea. Dong! 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 The morning bell rang, its voice solemn and bright. Along with that sound, there was a creak, and the tall and big cathedral door opened on both sides. 2 rows of knights of equal height walked out from the door first, one on the left and one on the right. They were all wearing bright armor with silver-white hollowed patterns, their helmets had red feathers on them, and they held long spears in their hands. Their bodies were emitting an invisible power. The square could not help but whisper to each other. Where did these knights come from? They're so mighty. Holy knights. They're the church's paladins, the holy knights. The knights stood on both sides of the door. Then, the sound of footsteps came from the church. Not long after, someone walked out again. It was a group of beautiful young girls. They were wearing white ceremonial robes with a golden foundation and a flawless white veil on their heads. Their exquisite faces and the holy clothes made them look like the legendary angels. They were extremely eye-catching. The square was in an uproar. Are they angels? Are they angels? They are the priests of the Holy Church. They are the most devout servants of God. They are angels. Really, is there really a God? At the same time, Irene, who was standing in front of the door, was stunned. The crowd in front of the door was far beyond her imagination. Thousands of eyes were staring at her and talking about her as an angel. As a female slave, she had never felt this before, and she didn't even dare to think about it. What? What was going on? Didn't they say that it was just a show? I was just completing Master's task, wasn't I? But why is my heart racing? I can't breathe. What should I do now? The same problem happened to the other priests. In the past, they were just lowly female slaves. They were the smallest type in the world. Now, under the gaze of so many people, everyone felt pressure of varying degrees. They were short of breath, unable to breathe, and their minds were blank. In their eyes, they were just female slaves. How could they receive so much attention and respect from so many people? Seeing that they were going to mess up, they heard a voice in their ears. The voice said, "Don't be afraid. God is watching you." It was like the sound of nature. It gave people an inexplicable sense of peace. Suddenly, the nervous female slaves calmed down and slowly walked forward. Their expressions became solemn and cautious, as if they had become one with the priest robes they were wearing. Naturally, they brought with them a holy aura. The priests were also divided into 2 rows. They came to the front of the knights and stood in 2 opposite rows. Standing still, Irene looked at the sea of people below and wondered, is there really a God? If there wasn't a God, then how could a person like her stand here? How could she be the center of attention? Her gaze inadvertently glanced at the priest robe on her body. The priest robe that they had worn earlier made them feel funny, but now she felt an inexplicable sense of honor. Clang! 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 The ceremonial bell that was filled with a holy aura rang at this moment. The noisy square fell silent. The commoners, the nobles, the holy knights, the light priests, everyone stopped talking. Everyone turned their heads in unison and looked towards the church's main door. Day! 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 Crisp footsteps sounded from afar and approached. The sound was not loud, but at this moment, it was exceptionally clear. A few people walked out of the door, 5 men and a woman. Walking at the front were 4 young men. They wore red robes with golden threads embroidered on their sleeves and the totem of the Holy Spirit flower as the base. Walking at the back was a kind-looking old man and a young and beautiful girl. The old man wore a white robe with golden edges and a golden crown on his head. He held a cross-shaped golden scepter in his hand. The girl's clothes were similar to those of the priests, but the patterns were more complicated. The 6 of them were shining with a faint golden light. They were particularly eye-catching in this dark moment. From the inside to the outside, from the top to the bottom, they exuded a holy aura. On the square, one could hear the sound of a needle falling. Both the commoners and the nobles were stunned at this moment. Looking at the 6 people who came, they felt an indescribable authority spread in the depths of their hearts, making them want to bow down and worship. Finally, on the square, a man who could not take it anymore kneeled on the ground. His hands were on the ground, and his forehead was barely touching the ground. Pa! 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 As if he was infected, the people on the square knelt down in groups, whether they were the original believers, the people who joined in the fun, the commoners, or the nobles. Regardless of whether they believed it or not, they all knelt down in front of the 6 people. Seeing this scene, Heath, who was in the team, could not help but feel a little surprised. Due to the cost of magic stones, he did not prepare any large-scale spirit-type spells to bewitch people. In other words, these people all knelt down on their own accord. Isn't this a little too much? Looking at those pairs of devout and fanatical eyes, Heath once again felt a chill in his heart. It was as if he had accidentally created an invisible monster. Hey! Heath! Why are you in a daze? Hurry up! An urging voice interrupted Heath's train of thought. It was the Pope of Light, Peter. According to their plan, Peter would be preaching during the Mass this time. In order to have a more shocking effect, everyone decided to let him fly in the air to preach. However, Peter was only a middle-level apprentice and did not know how to fly. He needed Heath's help. At this moment, seeing Heath in a daze, he seemed to be a little anxious. Oh! Hearing Peter's low voice, Heath quickly came back to his senses. Calm down. It's nothing. This is a good thing. The more fanatical and enthusiastic they are, the more productive they will be. I can hold on. After comforting himself in his heart, Heath walked forward. Then, the remaining 3 cardinals and the Holy Maiden of Light moved aside, leaving a separate space for the Pope of Light, Peter. Heath came to Peter's side and softly chanted a spell while secretly releasing magic power. Together with the light body potion that was given to Peter in advance, he finally slowly floated off the ground and rose into the air. The believers were indeed shocked. They lowered their heads even more. Peter continued to rise until he reached the height of the cathedral. At this moment, he stood in the air and looked down at the crowd on the ground. His pope's robe fluttered in the wind, causing him to release an inexplicable power. It was as if something was really pushing him. It was neither too early nor too late. The dawn arrived at this moment, and the sun rose from the other side of the mountain. The first ray of morning light of the day pierced through the clouds above and shot straight into the square. It hit Peter's body without any deviation. Patter! Patter! The crisp sound of wings flapping could be heard. A pure white pigeon appeared out of nowhere. It flapped its wings and flew straight up along the ray of light, winding around Peter's body. After taking a light breath, Peter opened his mouth. Heaven! Earth! At this moment, there was a solemn silence. There was only one voice left in the world. God said, "Let there be light." On this day, the first Mass of the Holy Church of Light was successfully held in the Cathedral of Calleru. The Holy Church of Light was also completely pushed to the front stage. The effect on the Mass was obvious. Before this, although the people here were called people, they were actually no different from animals. But now, the appearance of the Holy Church of Light had used a complete system to redefine people, giving them a brand new meaning to life. It told them that they could not cohabit with livestock, could not eat raw food, could not be naked, and so on. More importantly, Mass told them that they were not tools of the nobles and could have their own value of existence. Everyone was serving God and there was no distinction between nobility and inferiority in front of God. He told them. In short, a new set of order was established in Calleru city. This was a new set of order that was different from all the previous ones in this world. Shortly after the end of Mass, Heath made the next decision. He was going back to his hometown. Chapter 155, Prophets. The idea of returning to the Forgotten Land was first put forward during the first prophet-sharing meeting with Paul and the others. The Cathedral of Calleru, the Temple of Prayer. In the spacious Temple of Prayer, Pope Peter, the Holy Maiden of Light, Emily, and the 4 cardinals were gathered here. Around them were piles of magic stones, grey nuts, rootless grass, and other materials that grew in low elemental areas. They were piled high into a few grain-like heights. These were all just sent over by the nobles from all over the world. After the Mass, Heath had successfully won the support of a group of nobles. Tiffany, who had gone to Helen, had also successfully summoned an army. Heath himself had also recruited a certain number of holy knights in the city. After having enough manpower, he quickly restored order. Once order was restored, production would follow. During this period of time, under the coordination of the nobles, grey stone mines were dug up and low-grade materials were planted. The current batch was the harvest of the past few months, and the total price was around 80,000. Uncontrollable cheers rang out in the hall. Haha! We're rich! We're rich! Oh my god, am I dreaming? There are so many magic stones. We won't be able to spend them all in this lifetime. God bless, God bless! A few disciples of the light cult were overjoyed. As ordinary disciples, they could not earn hundreds of magic stones all year round. The resources in front of them were something that they did not even dare to think about in the past. Everyone sincerely felt that it was worth it even if they were to run away with a bucket now. Heath said, "These are only for this season. In addition, more than half of the land in the Kingdom of Navi has not been restored to order. If we manage it properly, the profits will at least double." He had to think long-term and give more benefits in order to win over these few disciples of the light cult. At this stage, they were very helpful to Heath. Paul's eyes were red. Double. Isn't that 200,000 magic stones? Is that so, Heath. Only now did he truly experience the joy of being a wizard master. Heath nodded. More or less. A conservative estimate would be more than 300,000 magic stones. The effect of the advanced ideology had exceeded Heath's expectations. According to Tiffany's report, the enthusiasm of the commoners under his rule had obviously increased. This sounded a little unbelievable and idealistic, but it was actually not hard to understand. Take mining as an example. In the past, mining was more or less the work of the nobles. Of course, everyone could avoid being lazy, but now that they could go to heaven after they died from mining, and those who were lazy would go to hell, everyone was naturally willing to work hard. Production capacity would naturally shoot up. This was the advantage of an advanced ideology. This might not be the most advanced ideology that could stimulate people's potential to the greatest extent, but it was the most easily popularized and most immediately effective ideology in the current era. As for the research of production methods, the invention of production tools, expansion of production materials, and other materialistic means, although it should be the true way to increase production capacity, but were slow to take effect. It had a long cycle, and the time and energy spent were too much. The simple truth of the aircraft carrier F-22 and nuclear fusion, which was easier to know. If the situation continued to develop, it would be enough to meet his future cultivation needs. The rest would have to wait until he ran out of magic stones. 300,000 magic stones. Hiss. A few disciples of the light cult took a deep breath. Paul said, as the leader of the light cult, I announce that from now on, the Church of Light and the light cult will be one. From now on, the light cult will be the Church of Light. If the reason they accepted Heath's words was because they had nowhere else to go. Now, they really treated it as their own business. Peter chuckled. That's good. From now on, you'll be my little brother. Emily said with some pity, is there a plague recently? A lot of sick people come to the church to pray for blessings. Let's think of a way to help them. This girl was a genuine muggle from the human world. She had not been in the wizard world for long, so her wizard's thinking was not that deep. Calm down. Isn't it normal to catch a cold during the season? Leave it to the nobles. Heath said, I agree with Emily's opinion. Paul frowned. What can we do? We can't cure them one by one, right? Wouldn't that be exhausting? Moreover, people get sick all the time. Do we need to train if we spend all our time on this? Heath took out a sheepskin scroll from his dimensional pocket. This is a scroll of potion formula. On it is recorded a low-level potion called Healing Water. It can relieve fatigue and cure some simple diseases such as cold and fever. The preparation procedure of this potion is not complicated, and the materials used are all warm. The requirements for the preparation are not high, so it can be prepared in large quantities. Aren't the probationary priests who have just been recruited still idle? Why don't we leave this to them to prepare while meditating? We can also give them a practice session. How about it? Heath did not have the energy to research and innovate, but he was still very willing to make use of the foundation of his predecessors to benefit the world. However, everyone was a little hesitant. Paul asked, then the ingredients. Heath pointed to the ones beside him. Let's take it out from here. Hearing that they had to spend magic stones, everyone was obviously unwilling. There are so many people. How many magic stones does each treatment cost? I also think that there's no need for that. Anyway, they're born very quickly, so it doesn't matter if some die, especially the old ones. Even if they're cured, they won't be able to work anymore. This. Forget it. In the eyes of wizards, humans were just tools. Who would think so much about tools? Heath did not comment. Everyone, take a long-term view. These things have never been done by wizards before. If we do it, we'll definitely be able to establish our reputation and justice. In the future, we'll be able to gather more people. There's no future for us to keep thinking about defending our land. Are you really satisfied with just 200,000 to 300,000 magic stones? The corners of everyone's mouths twitched. Just 200,000 to 300,000 magic stones. Wasn't this guy afraid of scaring them to death with such a big tone? After thinking for a moment, Peter said, I agree with Heath's opinion. Although he, the leader of the Holy Church, was only pushed forward because of his appearance, the more he understood the mechanism of Heath's, the more he realized that he was very interested in it. Compared to being an unknown little apprentice, it was like turning the world upside down. All right, all right. The Pope of Light and the Holy Maiden of Light have spoken. Can those apprentices do it? They can't even master meditation. We have to find someone to teach them. Celia can go. She has a good potions class. After order was restored, the special apprentice screening mechanism was established by Heath. Over the past few months, more than 10 apprentices with an elemental system had been identified. Heath changed the title for them from apprentices to apprentice priests, which was more suitable for his Holy Church's system. With the decision made, the holy water of the Holy Church was born. Peter continued, in addition, I think we should strengthen our armed forces, battle spells, and guardian magic arrays. Right now, we have nothing. If anyone attacks us, we'll be finished. As soon as Peter finished speaking, the others immediately began to discuss enthusiastically. Yeah, we're too weak, too weak. It'll be very easy for others to steal from us. Strengthen. We must strengthen. Why don't I take the magic stones to the old forest tomorrow? There's a market of the Warren family there. I'll go buy a few of his alchemy puppets. That's not enough. We need to protect the magic circle. We need to protect the magic array, something that can resist wizards. Those holy knights, Heath, think of something. See if you can make them more powerful. It was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. Carrying a bucket and running away was just a casual remark. That was hundreds of thousands of magic stones. Who would be willing to let go of such a huge amount of income? It was not an exaggeration to say that even if the wizards were to come personally, they would not easily give way. Heath shook his head. The Holy Knights won't be able to improve in the short term. The relevant exploration of the Grand Knights had reached a bottleneck. He had used all the information and knowledge he could. Without more discoveries, he could not give the Knights any extra strength. After a pause, he continued, I have some ideas on how to protect the magic array. What do you think of the Dark Cloud Beast? Everyone was shocked. Dark Cloud Beast. In the Underdark Tresia, the Dark Cloud Beast was definitely one of the best wizard pets. This kind of demonized beast was obedient, easy to tame, and more importantly, it was powerful. An adult Dark Cloud Beast could have the strength of an intermediate or even advanced level wizard. The defensive magic array built with the Dark Cloud Beast as the core was also one of the top defensive magic arrays in the Underdark Tresia. Paul asked, It's good, but do you have a way? Although the Dark Cloud Beast was top grade, it was too rare. In the entire Underdark Tresia, only the Shadow Tower had one. Everyone's eyes were locked on Heath, their eyes full of anticipation and excitement. Putting aside the many advantages of the Dark Cloud Beast, this was the Dark Cloud Beast. It was the symbol of the former ruler of the Underdark Tresia. Who wouldn't want to wear a crown that only an emperor could wear? Heath thought for a moment and said, if it's a way, it's not completely hopeless. Chapter 156, Surprise. Yes, Heath was thinking about the Dark Cloud Beast in his hometown, Greystone Castle. Since he knew the value of the Dark Cloud Beast, Heath wanted to keep it. Now that his forces had been mobilized, it was appropriate to get it to build a protective array. Then, Heath talked to everyone about this problem. Paul asked, the Forgotten Land? How long will it take to go back and forth? Heath said, if it's fast, it might take a few months. If it's slow, it might take 2 to 3 years. At the latest, it won't take more than 5 years. Paul frowned. That long? Now that the Holy Church had just started to make some progress, it was not appropriate for Heath, the founder, to just walk away. Heath explained, it doesn't matter. The Holy Church is now able to operate in all aspects. There's actually nothing for me to do if I stay here. It's a pity if that Dark Cloud Beast is missed on. This was not to say that he was shirking responsibility, but it was the truth. After this period of hard work, the various powers and frameworks of the Holy Church had been established. The only thing left was to wait for it to develop and grow by itself. There was no way to rely on external forces, so he could only use time to build things up. He would not be of much help even if he stayed here. As for whether Paul and the others would take over after he left, the entire system of the Holy Church was built by him, and the secret door of the Holy Knights was also buried completely. The wizard world was a world where strength spoke for itself. With just the few of them. It was not that Heath looked down on them. That was the truth. In short, they did not doubt the people they employed and did not doubt the people they suspected. They worked together as one. They were all partners of Heath's who had gone through thick and thin together. If they had different ideas, then Heath would not mind kicking them out at any time. However, from the looks of it, they were still relatively happy working together. Peter asked, "What if there are enemies?" Heath said, "I'll leave some battle spells for everyone to learn. Also, before I leave, I'll set up some magic arrays. It's basically no problem for me to defend against enemies below the rank of wizard. As for those above the rank of wizard, to be honest, it was impossible for him to fight against wizards if he stayed. He had just advanced and was not arrogant enough to fight against veteran wizards directly, not to mention that it might expose his strength and cause a series of problems." After a pause, he continued, "As for opponents above the wizard level, we all know how high the possibility is. Although their small gains seemed to be a lot, it was far from enough to attract the attention of the wizards. For wizards, the real territory was in the Underdark Tresia. Before the dispute over there was over, it was basically impossible for wizards to come to the human world to steal money. Didn't Heath dare to build a territory here because he saw the chaos in the Underdark Tresia? Now that Red Devil's blood is gone, as long as everyone doesn't cross the border and show off, it shouldn't be a problem to go to other wizard organizations to steal territory. Just focus on developing. Let's wait for this place to grow first, and then we'll go to the Underdark Tresia to find a place to stand." Heath did not quite understand the meaning of building a high wall, accumulating grain, and slowly becoming a king when he was reading history. However, ever since he had extracted the knowledge left behind by Campbell, Heath realized that he had somehow understood the essence of it. It was not just this, but also the various aspects of establishing the Holy Church and developing their influence in the past few days. Although many of these came from the cultural history that he had come into contact with in the past on Blue Star, the key factor that allowed Heath to be able to integrate them was the information he had previously extracted from those who had their own patterns. Otherwise, if it was Heath himself, he had been an ordinary white-collar worker in the city before, and his horizons were actually not that broad. Then, all right. You must bring back the Dark Cloud Beast. The matter had been decided. Before leaving, Heath had made a comprehensive military deployment to the entire Kingdom of Navi, including the deployment of defense, garrisons, defensive magic arrays, and so on in key strategic locations. In addition, he also combined magic and military, such as setting up magic devices that could sense elemental fluctuations in important towns, strategic locations, and so on, and magic potions that could prevent mental attacks. In short, after his series of deployments, the wizards, they didn't dare to say, but against apprentices that dared to have designs on this place, there was no problem. So, Heath set off on his journey. Oh! That wasn't right. Before he set off, there was a small incident that needed to be explained. A few days before he left the Church of Light, at the Long-Hair Princess Tower. Phew! Standing under the tower, Heath let out a sigh of relief. These few days had really tired him out. Setting up magic arrays, mobilizing the army, explaining and training the Holy Knights. There wasn't a single person in the entire Church of Light who could fight. In terms of military matters, he really had to do everything himself. If I have the chance in the future, I still have to groom an heir. Heath silently reminded himself. He chanted an incantation and his body floated off the ground, slowly flying towards the tower above. The church's meditation room had not been repaired, and some of the internal magic facilities were not fully prepared. Thus, Heath was basically still living alone in the Long-Hair Princess Tower. The height of more than 10 meters passed in an instant. Soon, Heath entered the tower. He took off his cloak and was about to take a shower. However, at this moment, he felt that something was wrong. Someone is there. His 5 senses as a knight allowed him to sense the presence of another person in the room. It seemed that someone had used some kind of spice, and there was a special fragrance that was very obvious. However, he did not receive any spiritual information. It seemed that the other party had used some kind of method to hide their spiritual power. Was it a wizard? Or a knight? What was the purpose? Assassination? Where did the enemy come from? Even if it was an enemy, they should have gone to assassinate Peter, Emily, and the others. Why did they come to assassinate him? And why did they use such a heavy spice for the assassination? Heath was puzzled. He frowned and looked around. Soon, he locked onto a large wooden box in the corner of the room. He felt that the person was hiding in this box. He was even more confused now. What kind of assassin would hide in the box to assassinate? Were they trying to scare someone to death? He asked sincerely, you didn't tell me you were coming to visit. As he spoke, his power as a wizard spread out so that he could control the person as soon as they appeared. The box did not move. Heath continued, do you still want me to invite you out? After a moment of silence. Click. The box opened. A figure stood up from within. When he saw the other party's face, Heath could not help but be stunned. With big watery eyes, beautiful facial features, and a graceful figure, the person standing in the box was a beautiful girl, and he knew this girl. It was Paul's sister, Celia. Celia looked at Heath, her big eyes full of curiosity. Ah, how did you know I was here? Heath asked back, what are you doing? As he spoke, he glanced out of the window, and then he noticed that there were traces of rapid growth on the nettles on the stone wall. It seemed that she had used plant magic to climb up. Celia said unhappily, you don't welcome me. I originally wanted to give you a surprise, big brother Heath. Heath raised his eyebrows. Only then did he notice that this little girl was obviously different from her usual self. She had even put on a layer of exquisite makeup and changed into a dress. Her arms and shoulders were bare, and a large part of her snow-white skin was exposed. It was unknown whether she had used perfume or spices on her body. An indescribably alluring fragrance mixed with the unique body fragrance of a virgin filled the air. Heath began to ponder over the scent. He could not help but laugh. Then what kind of surprise is Miss Celia going to give me? Celia pouted. You've already seen through it. What kind of surprise can there be? Heath continued, then how about I give you a surprise? Celia asked curiously, what? Heath hooked his right hand in that direction. Under the guidance of the wizard's hand, the girl let out a soft cry and fell into Heath's arms. Then, he put one hand on the girl's slender waist. The moment their skin touched, he could clearly feel the girl's entire body tensing up as if she had been electrocuted. However, she did not resist. Instead, she obediently leaned into Heath's arms. Heath conveniently tilted his head down and gently kissed the girl's earlobe. He asked softly, is this considered a surprise? The girl did not speak. Heath placed one hand on the girl's skirt and pulled it back gently. He easily pulled the girl's skirt down, and half of her body was naked in front of Heath. He continued to ask, how about this? The girl's face turned red. She still did not speak. She only slightly twisted her body, causing her skirt to completely slide down. She stripped herself naked as fast as she could. Heath asked, then, how about this? As he spoke, he made the girl. Chapter 157, White Harbor. If Celia were to be judged by one word, Heath would choose, green. Having never been in this field before, she was rather clumsy. She didn't know how to grind, how to kiss, or how to entangle. Her experience in this field was practically a blank. But that was the most alluring thing about her. A casual touch could make her whole body tense, a little teasing could make her overrun, and her whole body was tense when he entered. The enjoyment after entering the state and the deliberately repressed breath. All of these aroused the man's desire to conquer. The physical touch may not be the best, but the psychological pleasure was irreplaceable. 2 months later, the largest harbor on the west coast was the Forgotten Sea, White Harbor, at dusk. After 2 months of traveling, Heath finally arrived at the harbor. After looking at the sky, he decided to rest here for the night and set off the next morning. This harbor is quite beautiful. Looking around, he saw the white stone-paved road, the classical style of small buildings, the wide and spacious harbor, the golden beach, rows of sailboats, the tall lighthouses. At this moment, it was dusk. The orange light shone on the sea, turning it into a golden yellow. Some of the pubs on the street were already open for business, and the noise could be heard from time to time under the dim lights. The salty and wet sea breeze blew against them, bringing with it a slightly fishy smell. It was quiet and peaceful. White Harbor was separated from the forest by a distance, and there was a very steep mountain range in the middle. Because of this, this place was not affected by the flames of war, and everything was still peaceful. After strolling around for a while, Heath walked into a tavern by the roadside. Praise the sea god, let me survive the storm safely. I swear, that girl was lying by the side of the boat at that time. She was the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life. Unfortunately, below her waist was a fish. Heath walked to the bar counter, took out a gold coin, and put it on the table. He said, get me some food and prepare the best room here. I need hot water. Although the reason for returning to the Forgotten Land this time was because of the protection of the magic array, Heath himself had thought about going back a long time ago. As his first home after transmigrating, Heath had some feelings for the Ike continent. When he was there, he did not feel much, but after he came out, he missed it for some reason. He wasn't homesick. After all, he wasn't from here. He was probably just nostalgic. Other than that, he had been either trying to level up or on the way. Now that he had finally advanced to become a wizard, he wanted to catch his breath. Because of that, Heath was very relaxed when he came out this time. Along the way, he had been traveling and playing. Other than his daily training, he didn't do any extra homework. He put all his attention into relaxing. Praise the gold coins. The seaside cottage has everything you want. The tavern owner took the gold coins and quickly sent Heath a bunch of coconut wine and a portion of caviar. This was a kind of fruit wine unique to the seaside. It was made from a fruit called red coconut. It was more of a fruit wine, it had a coconut-like sweetness to it. While drinking the fruit wine, eating caviar, and listening to the chatter in the tavern, Heath was enjoying the exotic atmosphere of the Middle Ages to his heart's content. At this moment, the topics discussed by the two tables of diners beside him aroused his curiosity. A woman's upper body and a fish's lower body. Could it be the legendary mermaid? Yes, a mermaid. That's definitely a mermaid. Mermaid? That hasn't appeared for many years. Could the disappearance of the Eros have something to do with them? There are rumors that even the legendary wizards have come here to look for the gold treasure. Heath raised his eyebrows and asked the tavern owner, "What are they talking about?" The tavern owner looked over and turned around. "You mean that? What else could it be? It's just the most popular treasure in White Harbor, the gold treasure." "Gold treasure?" Heath asked. The tavern owner nodded and explained in detail, "There's a war at the edge of the forest. The king of the Valen dukedom was beheaded. It is said that their princess ran out and took away a lot of gold and treasures. She escaped from the pursuit and escaped to the sea with her people. It is said that the gold and treasures were filled with a huge sailboat with 5 masts. Unfortunately, they encountered a storm. Now everyone is looking for this sailboat. It is said that even wizards are tempted by the wealth and mermaids swim out of the sea for them. Every morning, you can see groups of treasure hunters setting off on boats to look for this batch of treasures." After a pause, the tavern owner asked, "What do you think, friend? Are you interested? If you need, I can introduce you to an outstanding team." Heath shook his head. "Thank you, but I don't need it. Treasure hunting was very fun, but the prerequisite was that the treasures had to be valuable." However, from Heath's point of view, these things were worthless to him, and he did not think that wizards would go through so much trouble for gold or anything else. But the mermaids, Heath was more interested. Mermaids were extraordinary creatures that lived in the sea. They were a sub-intelligent species, and were a group of the sea folk, one of the 9 great races in the wizard world. It was said that they had very good voices. They often sang beautiful songs in the sea covered with reefs, attracting passing sailboats to hit the reefs. When the sailors came down to repair the boats, they would sweep the sailors into the sea, or they would attack the sailboats directly. If there were women on the boats, they would eat them directly. If there were men, they would be taken into the deep sea to mate. Mermaids were all women and needed the help of other groups of males to reproduce. Among them, humans were their favorite mating partners. It was rumored that the reason why they were half human was because of this. Of course, after they successfully got pregnant, they would eat the men or raise them as nutrients to give birth to their babies. To many wizards, mermaids were of high research value. Some wizards liked to cook them because the flesh of mermaids had a high vitality, and eating them would help increase their vitality. Clang! At this moment, a dull sound came from outside the door. The door of the tavern was pushed open from the outside. Then, a few people walked in from outside the room. They were wearing green-grey leather armor and had a cross sword at their waist. It was obvious that they were not to be trifled with. The leader of the group was a strange-looking man. He was wrapped in a thick cloak and wore a leather mask on his face. His entire head was covered by a large hood, but a bald head could still be vaguely seen under the hood. Heath was stunned when he saw the man. This man was none other than the dark wizard he had seen in the forest. The group walked straight towards the bar counter after entering. Heath was sitting in front of the bar counter, blocking their path. One of the men did not waste any time and pushed towards him as if he wanted to push him aside. It could be seen that this man had some skills. He was not weaker than an official knight. If it was an ordinary person, he would have been pushed to the ground. However, it was nothing to Heath. He raised the oak cup to block the man's hand. The man was stunned. He did not expect his hand to be blocked. Then, he said in a very domineering manner, "Get lost." Heath glanced at him and did not say any nonsense. He put down the oak cup and left the chair, then lifted his leg and kicked. This kick was as fast as the wind and as fast as lightning. The knight's expression changed abruptly, and he hurriedly wanted to parry. However, it was impossible for him to block Heath's strength. Just as he reacted, Heath's whip kick had already landed on his chest. With a dull thud, the knight was sent flying and smashed onto the ceiling. He then fell heavily to the ground. The knight kneeled on the ground and clutched his chest, unable to recover for a long time. The knights who were accompanying him were stunned at first, but they quickly reacted. Clang! Clang! A cold metallic sound interweaved. Several cross-guard swords were pulled out at the same time. Chapter 158, Metamorphosis. Clang! Clang! A cold metallic sound exploded as the knights drew their cross swords one after another. One of the knights kicked down a table and used the raised table to block the bald man. Two of the knights hid behind the table and pulled out the short crossbows that they carried with them. The rest of the knights surrounded the aisle on both sides. Under the flickering candlelight, the cross-guard sword emitted waves of cold light. Ah! My God! Dude, what happened? Can you not do this? For the sake of the sea god, please let them stop. The customers in the tavern finally reacted. They screamed and ran away. The entire tavern was in chaos. A fierce battle was inevitable, but at this moment... All right. A lukewarm voice sounded. It was the bald man. He glanced at the chaotic tavern indifferently and said in a slightly dissatisfied tone, "Don't waste my time here for some messy matters." Yes. The knights hurriedly put away their cross swords. A knight walked over and bowed to Heath. "I apologize for my companion's rudeness. I beg for your forgiveness." After saying that, he lowered his head and handed over a money bag. Heath took the money bag casually and did not continue to feel sorry for this group of people. He was in a good mood today and did not want to kill anyone. The knight took a detour around the bar counter and asked for a few rooms from the tavern owner. Then, the group of people went upstairs, including the knight who was kicked away by Heath. Soon, someone helped him away. The originally chaotic tavern quickly regained its calm. "It's that group of knights. I heard that they have already gotten a boat and are preparing to go out to sea. These are real knights." Hearing the crowd's discussion, Heath's face became a little more curious. He gently knocked on the table of the bar counter and asked the tavern owner who was hiding under the table, "Who are these people?" The tavern owner hurriedly climbed out from under the table, his attitude surprised and respectful. After all, he had seen Heath's strength with his own eyes. He respectfully replied, "Sir, these are a group of people who came from the Valen Duchy not long ago. There are rumors that they are sent by the current new Duke of the Valen Duchy. Their goal is to recover the treasure that was taken away by their princess. Not long ago, they bought a boat at the dock and recruited sailors." After listening to the owner of the tavern, Heath became even more curious. The gold, silver, and jewelry of the secular world were worthless to wizards. However, the bald man in front of him did not make any money out of his windfall. Wasn't it strange that he came here to buy a boat and go to sea? Could it be that there were some good things in the treasure? After thinking about it carefully, it was really possible. The Valen Dukedom was a wizard organization in the southern part of the Underdark Tresia. Its strength was almost the same as the Light Cult, and the wizard master was only an advanced apprentice. However, their relationship with Shadow Tower was very good. It was said that the wizard master himself was once an official apprentice of Shadow Tower, and because of that, he occupied a fertile land in the Underdark Tresia that did not match his strength. After all these years of management, he should know that he had accumulated a lot of wealth. Not to mention the many, official-level wizard tools were definitely indispensable. Having a treasure and not having the ability to protect it, he should know what would happen. It did not matter if he had Shadow Tower to protect him during peacetime. Now that Shadow Tower had collapsed, it would be strange if an organization like this was not targeted. If the organization was destroyed, wouldn't it be normal for the successor of the organization to be forced to flee to the human world with his wealth? Thinking of this, Heath could not help but become interested. He asked in more detail, "Tell me about the specific content of this gold treasure." Of course, as long as I know. The tavern owner was about to speak, but at this moment, a loud noise came from the tavern. Gold treasure! Gold treasure! Ha ha ha, I see them. Gold, countless gold, like an ocean. Sob, 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 don't kill me. I don't want it, I don't want any gold treasure anymore, I don't want to die. The voice came from the corner of the tavern. There was a man sitting there, like a drunkard, crying and laughing at the same time, talking nonsense crazily. The tavern owner explained sympathetically, that's Shabby. He was an excellent sailor, but his ship went silent during the storm not long ago. He was the only one who survived the whole fleet. After that, he became abnormal. He always said that he found the sunken ship and the gold treasure. But after the storm ended, everyone explored the area he mentioned and found nothing. I guess he couldn't bear the blow. At this time, a man with a mustache walked over with an oak cup. The man with a mustache placed the cup on the wooden table and said to Heath, "Friend, if you are interested in the golden treasure, can you consider our fleet? We are planning to go out to sea to find it. Believe me, we have the most outstanding sailors, captain and crewmates in White Harbor. If the gold treasure really exists, it will definitely belong to us." Heath said, "Thank you, but I will not consider it for the time being." Even if he wanted to search for the gold treasure, he would definitely build his own fleet. As he spoke, his gaze continued to rest on the drunkard in the corner. He did not know what was going on, but this man gave him a strange feeling. He did not know what it felt like. This was obviously just an ordinary human male, but his spiritual fluctuations were somewhat abnormal. The mustached man saw this and persuaded, "Friend, if I were you, I wouldn't focus on this. Recently, they announced that those who know the clues to the gold treasure can form an army. But he is actually just trying to cheat people into giving him drinks. Was he really just a liar? He would know if he tried." Thinking of this, Heath walked over with a glass of wine in his hand. "My friend, would you like a glass of wine?" He put requiem grass in the wine. It was a material for the soul. With the help of the requiem grass, one could perform many spiritual spells. Thank you. You are such a good person." The man held the oak cup with both hands and gulped down the wine. Heath then asked gently, "Tell me, what did you see?" His voice had a strange tone. His voice was unusually undulating, and it had a kind of bewitching feeling. This was a spiritual spell, truth. As the name suggested, it was a spell that could make people speak the truth. With Heath's strength as a wizard, even an ordinary apprentice would not be able to resist it. The man's gaze immediately became blurred. He looked at Heath and muttered to himself as if he was in a dream. "Island. Island. Man-eating island. It ate us, all of us died, all of us were eaten by it, sob, sob." Heath was stunned. Theoretically speaking, a human who was under the truth spell would only follow the wishes of the wizard himself. Whatever the wizard asked, he would answer in detail, not just a few words like this. Could there really be a problem? After thinking for a while, Heath decided to directly use the soul-searching spell to try. He then used the hypnosis on the man. "Look at my eyes." "Yes, look into your eyes." The man raised his head and looked at Heath in confusion. Their gazes intertwined. Heath then used his spiritual tentacles to invade the man's soul. It was the simplest soul-searching technique. It could directly search the man's memories and past. It was an ability that only wizards could use. The spiritual tentacles easily invaded the man's soul. But then, Heath was stunned. No. After the spiritual tentacles extended into the man's memory, Heath was surprised to find that there was no scene of the shipwreck in the man's memory. Did the man really lie? No, that's not right. The memory was forcefully erased. As he gained a deeper understanding of the memory, Heath made more discoveries. It was not that the man's memory was not there, but there was a blank space. It was obviously a blank space that was forcefully erased by someone. Who did it? Subconsciously, Heath extended his spiritual tentacles into the blank space, intending to investigate this. However, at this moment, an extremely dangerous feeling suddenly attacked him, as if something had been disturbed by him. Heath was shocked and hurriedly withdrew his spiritual power. Even though he moved quickly, he was still one step too slow. The noisy tavern suddenly became quiet. To be exact, it was not quiet, but completely forbidden. The customers of the bottle of wine froze, the spilled wine froze in the air, and the dancing candle light froze. The entire tavern became a forbidden scene, as if it had been hit by some kind of time spell. And then, the tavern gradually lost its color in front of Heath, and the originally colorful scene became black and white. Heath's expression changed drastically. He realized that he, too, had fallen into a situation where he could not move, and the color of the surrounding scenery also gradually lost its color. It was as if he was tightly bound by an invisible energy and had fallen into a pool of unusually powerful energy. At the same time, a mass of black fog suddenly surged out of the opposite man's body. The black fog rose into the air and then gathered into a large hand, grabbing toward Heath. Chapter 159, Low Level. Hiss. At the critical moment, Heath's innate spell was automatically activated. A wisp of flame suddenly bloomed, illuminating the black and white world. As the flame lit up, Heath instantly regained control of his body. He hurriedly retreated, and the large hand that was grabbing at him almost brushed past his face. Huff! 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 The gasps of distance reverberated in the room. In a world of black and white, Heath stared nervously at the man in front of him. After the huge black hand grabbed nothing, the man suddenly twisted his neck in a strange posture and turned his head bit by bit. His two eyes stared straight at Heath. His grayish-black pupils were not confused from before. Instead, they were filled with curiosity, as if he was surprised that Heath had dodged the attack just now. That gaze seemed somewhat familiar to Heath. Thinking about it carefully, when the group of knights had provoked him previously, he had also looked at them with the same gaze. Similarly, the man did not continue to make things difficult for Heath. After glancing at him casually, he withdrew his gaze. The black claw that had extended out also collapsed into a cloud of black smoke with a bang. This black and white world also collapsed together with him. Bang! 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 The tables, chairs, candlesticks, wine glasses, and customers all exploded, exploding into clouds of black smoke. The black smoke lost Heath's vision, and only made his vision blur. What do you think, friend? With your skills, if you were on our ship, you would definitely be able to develop even better, the tireless voice of persuasion rang out. The man who entered his vision was a man with a small mustache. Heath was stunned. He looked around and found that the tavern had returned to its original state. Moreover, time seemed to have gone back a little, back to the time when he went to look for the customer in the corner. What exactly happened just now? An illusion? No, it can't be an illusion. The reaction in Heath's spiritual sea made him very clear that he had really experienced everything just now. He had indeed been attacked by some unknown force. What on earth did it? One had to know that he was already a genuine wizard now. However, that energy just now had actually made him unable to resist at all. In that instant, he felt as small as an ant. Was he an intermediate wizard? An advanced wizard? Or? No, that's impossible, right? Heath shook his head. An existence at that level was already at the peak of this world. There weren't many who possessed such strength in the entire world. It was impossible for him to meet them out of the blue. Rumble. At this moment, a roar suddenly sounded from outside the window. In front of the explosion, a bolt of lightning cut through the sky, brightening up the sunset. The customers in the tavern said, "The storm is coming. It seems that those who go out to sea these 2 days are going to be in big trouble." Heath carried the quilt and looked out of the window. Looking at the waves that suddenly rolled up in the distance and the bolts of lightning that continuously tore the sky apart, the pride and arrogance that he had when he advanced to a wizard seemed to have retreated at this moment. Wizards were indeed very powerful. They were gods in the eyes of mortals. In the eyes of mortals, they were already existences that were immortal. However, in the entire wizard world, this was nothing. There were too many existences that were stronger than wizards in this world. In front of those terrifying existences, even wizards would easily lose their lives. Strength, I need more strength. Heath clenched his fist and spoke quietly. In the end, Heath still didn't understand what had attacked him. He only knew that it was some kind of powerful life form that used a man as a medium to launch an attack on him. It was probably because the man had the mark of that life on him. When Heath was digging into the man's memories, he accidentally disturbed the other party and attracted their attention. Heath had hesitated to investigate further, but before he could make a decision, he lost his chance. The next morning, the man died. The sailor who had been drifting on the sea for most of his life was found drowned face down in a small ditch in front of the tavern. The water was not deep enough to reach the man's ankles. Heath had also gone to the scene. Compared to the man's unique way of dying, what surprised Heath more was the phenomenon after the man's death. In just one night, the man's soul had disappeared without a trace. One had to know that the speed of the soul's disappearance was closely related to the law. It was not easy to keep the soul for a long time, but it was even more difficult to make the soul disappear in a short period of time. At least this was definitely not something that a wizard could do. Even if a soul dissipated, Heath would not be able to continue investigating. He could only put this aside for the time being and wait until he became stronger before looking for the results. For now, he should focus on increasing his strength. Thus, the next day, Heath followed the original plan and embarked on the journey back to his hometown on the wizard ship. A few days later, on the west side of the Forgotten Sea. On the endless sea, a three-masted sailboat with white sails was sailing alone. The sailboat was swept up and down by the undulating waves. The vast sea surface was like a mountain range. In a room on the lower deck of the sailboat. Sizzle sizzle. The crisp sound of a candle was heard. A white candle was burning on the wooden table. It was daytime, but the candle was burning. The light from this candle was also different from ordinary candles. The light was not as bright as ordinary candles, and the color was not a single bright yellow, but a colorful one. If one observed carefully, they would find that when the candle was burning, there were some colorful light dots rising from the candle. This was a meditation candle, also known as an elemental candle. As the name implied, this was a candle made from pure elemental examples. When it was burning, it would release a large amount of elemental energy, which would increase the number of elements in a certain area. It was mostly used for wizards training in low elemental areas. At this moment, in front of the meditation candle, Heath was sitting on a chair and meditating with his eyes closed. The system's notification sound rang in his ears one after another. Beep, elemental extraction successful. Spiritual power increased. Beep, elemental extraction successful. Spiritual power increased. This continued for half an hour before Heath slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, there was a look of joy in his eyes. The reason why he was in a good mood was that during this meditation just now, the power that he had accumulated for a long time finally had another breakthrough. His spiritual power finally crossed the impetuous elementary rank and completely stabilized. At this level, it also meant that he had entered the elementary rank and became a true low-rank wizard. Chapter 160, C. The low-level wizard stage was the same as the apprentice stage. It was divided into beginner, low-level early stage, low-level intermediate stage, low-level advanced stage, and low-level peak stage. After reaching the low-level peak stage, one could advance to intermediate-level wizard. And judging the marks of each level, it was still 13 basic elemental runes. In the vast spiritual sea, there was now a 10-meter square pool. This was an elemental pool that only wizards had. In the pool, there was a colorful mist. This was the wizard's purifying magic power. Around the elemental pool, there were many mysterious runes. There were a total of 13, which were the 13 basic will runes that were created during the apprentice's meditation. Now, these will runes were mostly grayish-white in color. 3 of them were lit up and constantly released purifying magic power. When all 13 runes were lit up, a wizard would be able to advance to an intermediate wizard. This was the case for intermediate and advanced wizards. Only after advancing to the stigmata realm would there be any changes. I only lit up 3 of them in a year, but it's much slower than when I was an apprentice. Heath remembered that when he was an apprentice, it only took him 3 short months to advance from beginner to low level. However, after advancing to a wizard, it took him more than a year to advance from beginner to low level. It was several times more than that. The spiritual force required for the wizard level is too much. After advancing to a wizard, the spiritual force required to continue advancing had increased by several times. Spiritual power, 118. When he had just advanced to a wizard, Heath's spiritual force was only 108, but now it had increased to 118 to reach low level. After all, the spiritual power he had accumulated during his entire apprentice period was only about 10. At this rate, I wonder when I'll be able to advance to an intermediate wizard. According to Heath's knowledge, the spiritual force required to advance to an intermediate wizard was at least 300. Even with the current meditation rate, it would take at least 30 years to reach this number. One had to know that more than half of the 10 points of spiritual power he had obtained from meditation in the past year were refined from the large amount of elements he had squeezed during his advancement. The amount of spiritual power he had to rely on his own cultivation was only a small part of it, not to mention that the path to becoming a wizard would become more and more difficult as time passed. I should also upgrade the system on the way back to the Forgotten Land. Heath silently planned. After thinking for this period of time, Heath had also thought it through. The system was his greatest help. With such a treasure, why would he need to give up the near and seek the far? Instead of looking for other ways to increase the efficiency of his advancement, he might as well upgrade the system. Since it was basically impossible to find any elemental substances in the Forgotten Land, he might as well take advantage of this period to upgrade the system. Speaking of which, I don't know if I've gained anything today. As if he suddenly thought of something, Heath looked out of the window through the round boat before leaving the cabin and walking towards the deck. There was no one on the deck. The sailboat was floating on the sea like a ghost ship. The raised mast automatically changed the angle and adjusted the direction of the wind. The rudder in the captain's cabin automatically turned around, as if there was an invisible crew busy on the ship. Wizard ships basically had automatic navigation magic. As long as a specific spell and rune were cast on the compass and nautical chart, the sailboat would automatically sail according to the route. Of course, the price was not cheap. Even if it was just maintaining the most basic navigation, it would still cost one high-level magic stone a week. All the way to the port side of the cabin, there was a large fishing net hanging there. I hope there are more extraordinary species. Hoping silently in his heart, Heath pulled the fishing net up. The sea area of the wizard world was even larger than Blue Star, more than 80% of the area of this world. In a sense, the sea was the main color of this world. There were too many strange creatures living in the sea that were not found on land. These new species could basically improve Heath's spiritual power. Since the voyage, Heath had been able to harvest something here every day. Crash! It was the sound of the scaffolding turning. The fishing net was soon fished up. The large fishing net was already filled with a net full of sea creatures. They swayed their tails and twisted. Some with extraordinary energy even wanted to spray ice arrows and water droplets from the fishing net. However, their struggles were futile. This fishing net was made from the resin of a man-eating tree. Heath had cast some strengthening spells, and its energy intensity had reached 30 degrees. It was impossible for anyone without the strength of a wizard to escape from it. After throwing the sea creatures in the net onto the deck, Heath picked them up. Other than the ones with extraordinary properties, he also kept some of the delicious sea creatures. Before the journey started, he bought a lot of spices. After boarding the ship, he would cook a seafood feast, such as grilled squid, steamed king crab, grilled king prawn, and boiled abalone. Basically, he would change his taste every day. That was how life was on the ship. After all, there was no extra space for activities. He had to find some fun to kill time while meditating. Otherwise, it would be boring to be stuck in this small space all day. Other than his appetite, he would also find some other fun, such as occasionally going for a swim when the weather was calm and the weather was good, or practicing his shape-shifting spell. Beep, extraction successful. Spiritual power plus 0.02. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained multi-headed squid's life sequence. Beep, extraction successful. Soon, Heath extracted the extraordinary sea species coefficient in his net pocket that day. He extracted a total of more than a dozen, close to 0.1 spiritual power. Other than that, he also extracted the life sequence of several species. These could eventually be transformed into his magic. Leaving a small amount of food, the remaining sea species were all thrown back into the sea intact. Splash! Splash! The sound of the sea species falling into the water came. Lying on the railing, Heath looked at the endless sea in the distance. In the past, when he was young, he always dreamed of one day when he grew up, he would be able to drive a boat out to the sea by himself, fishing, watching the sea, and playing in the water. Now, it could be considered that his dream had come true. The weather on the sea changed at will. It was still sunny in the morning, but unexpectedly, in the afternoon, a dark cloud suddenly gathered in the sky. At night, with a loud rumble, heavy rain fell from the sky. Somewhere west of the Forgotten Sea area. Hoo hoo hoo! Hwalala! Fierce winds howled and torrential rain poured down. On the vast sea surface, huge waves rolled up one after another. The smaller ones were 7 or 8 meters tall, while the larger ones were dozens of meters tall, or even hundreds or thousands of meters tall. In the huge waves, a small white boat was drifting alone. In front of the huge waves, it was as small as an ant, as if it would be drowned by the waves at any time. On the deck of the small boat, Heath held onto the railing with one hand. Other than that, the wizard's force field had also been released. Even so, with every rise and fall of the waves, he still felt like he was going to be thrown out by the waves. Every rise and fall of the waves would push the boat up a few meters or more, and then it would fall heavily to the ground. This time, the intense feeling of weightlessness made Heath involuntarily think of the roller coaster in the amusement park. No, this is much more exciting than a roller coaster. Heath looked ahead. In front of him, a huge wave of 7 to 8 meters was coming towards the boat. The waves crashed heavily onto the wizard boat, and with a boom, it was as if a spell had exploded on the boat. If not for the abyss wood, which was known for its sturdiness, the boat would have fallen apart. However, this wave was only a drop in the ocean at this time. Soon, the receding wave made a comeback, and this time, the height of the pile was dozens of meters high, like a tall mountain. The tall mountain was like a big hand slapping down on the boat. After another loud bang, the whole body of the boat became violent. Heath's mimicry shield could not help but activate automatically. From this, one could see the strength of this attack. Hoo-hoo, Heath panted lightly. In terms of the total amount of energy, such a huge force was no less than an official level spell. However, even such a powerful wave could be seen everywhere on the surface of the sea. Rumble. A deafening explosion sounded. An incomparably thick bolt of lightning tore through the entire sky and struck the surface of the sea, lighting up the entire horizon. Following this bolt of lightning, an unprecedentedly huge wave rolled up on the surface of the sea. The wave was over 1,000 meters long. From afar, it looked like a curtain of sky, blotting out the sky and covering the sun. One could not see the end of it at all. In front of such a huge wave that seemed like the end of the world, even wizards could only feel helpless and despair. Phew! Heath took a deep breath and stared at the huge wave that was coming at him. Has it reached its limit? Although he was very reluctant to use magic stones, Heath knew that such a huge wave was definitely not something that the defensive power of the wizard ship alone could withstand. When the huge wave crashed down, the ship would be crushed into pieces. Thus, Heath did not hesitate and decisively chanted a short spell. As the spell was chanted, mysterious runes suddenly lit up on the outer side of the wizard ship. A thin film slowly rose to the outer side of the ship and formed a bubble-like substance that enveloped the entire wizard ship. This was a defensive spell on the wizard ship, specially used to sail during storms. With the activation of the bubble, the wizard ship slowly sank into the sea, and the originally bumpy hull suddenly calmed down. Standing on the deck, Heath looked at the world outside through the bubble film. He did not blink. He looked at the storm, looked at the lightning in the sky, and looked at the huge sea waves that were like the sky. The new tide rose and fell inexplicably, surging inexplicably. Wizards were indeed very powerful. But compared to the whole world, compared to this, wizards were still a weak part of it. In front of this world, wizards were no different from humans. They were just bigger ants. This storm lasted for a whole week before it ended. And the day after the storm ended, Heath encountered a strange thing. Chapter 161, Mutation. A week later, west of the Forgotten Sea area. Blub. 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 On the calm sea surface, a long string of bubbles suddenly appeared. Then, a mast slowly rose from the bottom of the sea, followed by the watchtower, then the deck, and the cabin. Not long after, a white sailboat appeared on the sea surface. It was a three-masted sailboat. Its appearance was not much different from that of an ordinary sailboat, but the strange thing was that the outside of the boat was wrapped in a layer of transparent film, as if it was contained in a large bubble. On the deck, Heath looked up into the sky. The dark clouds that had lasted for many days had disappeared, and the bright sunlight once again fell on the surface of the sea. It finally stopped. Heath heaved a long sigh of relief. He had thought that it was just a small storm, but he had never expected that the storm would last for a whole week. In order to avoid the storm, he could only activate the stealth mode of the wizard ship. Thinking of this, Heath could not help but feel a little distressed. The unusual consumption of magic stones in the stealth mode, in a short week, had used up a total of 30 high-level magic stones, which was equivalent to a huge sum of 300,000 magic stones. If the storm did not stop, Heath felt that he was going to go bankrupt. Next time I go out to sea, I should hire some crew members, Heath reminded himself silently. Although the wizard ship could be operated automatically, it was still relatively dull and would only advance according to the planned route. If there were experienced crew members, they would usually be able to predict the storm in advance and change the route to avoid it. At this moment, Heath seemed to have sensed something and his nose moved. There was a bloody smell, and it was very intense. He frowned and looked straight ahead. The bloody smell was obviously coming from that direction. Could it be that something happened over there? Should I change the direction to avoid it? While Heath was hesitating, the sailboat had already sailed into the sea area in front of him. The magnificent scenery in front of him also attracted his sight. The first thing he saw was red. What he saw was a bright red. The undulating waves and flowing sea water were completely dark red. It was like a red ocean. As far as the eye could see, there was no end to it. The sea was densely packed with marine carcasses floating in this sea area. From small fish that were about an inch long to giant squid that was as big as a house, and even giant shrimp crabs that were as tall as a small building. The pungent smell of blood filled the air, indicating the origin of this sea. This was a sea dyed red by fresh blood. Or rather, this entire sea was made of fresh blood. Medium-grade blue-striped shark, high-grade sea tiger belt fish, high-grade three-headed octopus. This is a giant squid of the rank 1 Sea King class? And a Sea King giant shrimp crab. Heath was shocked. Low-grade, medium-grade, high-grade, all kinds of sea demonized beasts were countless. Among them, Heath even saw a Sea King demonized beast, which was equivalent to a wizard. I have to leave this place quickly. Without any hesitation, Heath quickly opened the navigation chart of the wizard ship and adjusted the course to avoid this place. There were so many sea monsters' corpses, even the Sea Kings that were equivalent to wizards were mixed in. No matter how this happened, Heath knew that there was definitely a danger ahead that he could not deal with. It can't be. However, when Heath's gaze fell on the navigation chart, his expression suddenly froze. At this time, he realized that he had unknowingly deviated from the original course and entered the dangerous area where the sea tribes were. Most of the areas in the ocean were not safe. There were a large number of sea folk living there. Once any foreign creatures entered, they would be fiercely attacked. Wizards often used the ocean to go to various areas to search for materials. Because of this, several fierce wars broke out between the two. It was said that after a certain stigmata level wizard mediated, the sea folk and wizards finally came to peace. After that, the wizards and the sea folk carved out some areas in the ocean for the wizards to sail through. This was also the route. According to the rules, wizards could only sail through the route. Once they passed this area, they would be attacked by the sea folk. One had to know that the relationship between the two had never been very peaceful. Is it because of the storm before? Forget it, now is not the time to worry about this. Let's return to the route first. However, the trouble now was that the fastest route to return to the correct route was through this red ocean. What should I do? Should I speed up? Or take a detour from somewhere else? After hesitating for a second, Heath gritted his teeth and drew a few runes on the chart, controlling the wizard ship to sail into this red ocean. From the map, if he took a detour, he would have to travel for at least a few days, which would be even more dangerous. After all, this area belonged to the sea folk. On the other hand, it would only take them 2 hours to return to the correct route through the Red Sea. Bang! 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 The sound of the sea corpses colliding against the hull of the ship was heard one after another. The wizard ship stabbed into the pile of corpses like a sharp knife and slowly moved forward. While controlling the wizard ship to move forward, Heath looked around with a solemn expression. What kind of monster did this? While feeling nervous, Heath also stretched out his wizard's hand and threw the sea corpses onto the ship for extraction. Beep, extraction successful. Spiritual power plus 0.2. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.1. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained giant red striped snail's life sequence. Beep, extraction successful. The vast majority of the sea creatures that roamed here were things that Heath could not come into contact with on land. Moreover, these were of a higher level. Basically, Heath could extract a large number of attributes from them. Spiritual power, strength, agility, constitution, life sequence, and so on. In particular, the two giant squid and the giant shrimp crab were both comparable to wizard-level sea kings. Each of them gave Heath a huge boost to his attributes. What a pity! If I had known earlier, I would have brought more spatial pockets. These sea creatures were treasures that were rarely seen on normal days. Their experimental value was very high. If they were brought ashore, they would definitely fetch a high price. Unfortunately, there were too many of these materials. It was impossible to bring all of them back with the magic stone pocket that Heath was carrying. Even so, Heath still tried his best to collect them. He released his wizard's hand one after another and grabbed the sea creatures onto the deck. After extracting them, he quickly cut off the most valuable parts of the sea creatures, such as the polyps of the red-striped giant snail, the parotid glands of the silver fish, and the claws of the blue seahorse. His long-time accumulation of knowledge was fully utilized at this moment. With the large amount of knowledge he had accumulated in Shadow Tower, he could easily identify the identity of each sea creature and the most valuable parts of their bodies, and quickly cut and harvest them. He was like a high-speed machine, releasing and capturing the sea creatures, extracting and cutting the organs of the sea creatures, and capturing the sea creatures. The process was repeated. Under such high-speed operation, at least 3 to 5 sea creatures were extracted and cut every minute. This continued for more than 2 hours, and the end of the sea was already in sight. Phew! Finally, I'm out. Heath let out a long sigh and looked back at the Red Sea behind him. There were still a large number of sea creatures' corpses there. The amount he had extracted and harvested just now was not even 1% of the sea area. If he continued to extract the sea corpses, Heath believed that his strength would skyrocket and he would be able to earn a large amount of magic stones. However, without any hesitation, Heath controlled the wizard ship to sail out of the sea without stopping. In Heath's opinion, safety was the most important thing. To be able to create such a large number of sea corpses, it was definitely an existence that he could not deal with. No matter how many magic stones he earned, he had to be alive to spend them. The wizard ship moved forward quickly, and the distant clean sea surface was already in sight. However, at this moment, splash! A violent sound of water flowing could be heard. Following that, a large whirlpool suddenly appeared at the bottom of the sea. Chapter 162, Fierce Battle. Splash! The sound of a violent current could be heard. On the Red Sea, it suddenly began to spin, and a vortex appeared. As soon as the vortex appeared, it began to spin rapidly and spread out rapidly. In a moment, it had expanded to a diameter of nearly 1,000 meters. Under the strong suction force, the surrounding sea corpses were swept into the vortex in piles, and sank to the bottom of the sea along with the high-speed spinning vortex. It was as if there was a huge abyss mouth below. On the deck, Heath's hair stood on end. He waved his hands rapidly and drew out runes one after another. He chanted incantations non-stop, and his spirit power was completely focused on controlling the wizard ship. The wizard ship's power was fully activated, and it quickly retreated in the direction it came from. The vortex came too suddenly, and it just happened to appear in the direction he was originally traveling in. Now, how to escape from the Red Sea was no longer the top priority. The most important thing was how to avoid being sucked into the vortex. Damn it! Hurry up! Under Heath's repeated urging, the wizard ship rushed into the Red Sea and quickly sailed far away. It retreated for nearly 1,000 meters until it was confirmed that the effect of the vortex was not that far away. Heath then changed the spell runes and stopped the wizard ship. Standing on the deck, Heath looked in that direction from 1,000 meters away. At this moment, a large vortex appeared on the surface of the sea. The diameter of the vortex was nearly 1,000 meters. It spread on the surface of the sea like a giant mouth of the abyss, quickly swallowing the marine corpses on the surface of the sea. What exactly is that vortex? Heath frowned. The appearance of this vortex was too sudden and obviously did not seem to be formed naturally. At this moment, Heath suddenly felt a violent elemental fluctuation coming from beneath the vortex. Under the red surface of the sea, a black shadow could be vaguely seen. Moreover, that black shadow was still rising to the bottom of the sea at an extremely fast speed. Just as Heath was shocked, a terrifying scene appeared. Crash! A huge sea creature jumped up from under the sea surface. It seemed to be a catfish, but it was incomparably huge. At a glance, it was probably thousands of meters long, and one had to know that it was only a part of its body that jumped out of the sea surface. What a terrifying giant! The huge catfish jumped high like a naughty child and then crashed heavily into the sea. In an instant, it set off a huge wave hundreds of meters high, sweeping up the surrounding sea carcasses and quickly spreading to the surroundings. Then, it opened its huge mouth, which was as big as a football field. With a light opening and closing, countless sea carcasses rushed into its mouth. Catfish whale! It's the Chamo catfish whale! Heath quickly recognized the identity of the giant beast. It was a sea creature called the catfish whale. It belonged to a giant species. There were a few catfish whales that had even grown into a world species. So I've barged into the catfish whale's hunting ground. At this time, Heath finally knew where the Red Sea and the mountain of sea creature corpses came from. They were all done by the catfish whale. Catfish whales were extremely savage and mischievous sea beasts. Before they ate their prey, they would tease and kill the prey. In addition, they had an astonishing appetite. Because of this, the area where catfish whales frequented could often see the spectacular sight of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Heath could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Catfish whales were sea emperor-level demonized creatures. Their strength was equivalent to that of high-level wizards. They were only second to stigmata-level existences. Oh God, I can't be that unlucky. Without much time to think, Heath quickly controlled the wizard ship to sail to the side. The most important thing now was to get to this dangerous area as soon as possible. However, just as the wizard ship started to move, he suddenly felt a sharp feeling behind him. He subconsciously turned his head, but he suddenly saw that the catfish, who was eating, had already noticed him. At this time, it was staring at him with its big round eyes. A chill rose from the bottom of his heart. Heath cursed. Then, he turned and left. He left in time, but the catfish whale was not going to let him go. The catfish whale's belly was covered with dense whale lice and barnacles. These were the relatives of the catfish whale. They usually lived on the catfish whale's body and relied on the catfish whale's metabolic secretions to survive. At the same time, they also obeyed the catfish whale's orders. At this moment, these dolphin-sized arthropod sea beasts fell into the sea from the body of the catfish whale and swarmed toward Heath in groups. The speed of the wizard ship was not considered slow. On average, it had a speed of at least 40 knots. On land, it was no slower than the speeding cheetahs. However, compared to these sea creatures, it was still too slow. Any barnacle had a speed of 40 to 50 knots. This chase was at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing that it was inevitable to be caught, Heath did not hesitate. He took out the necromancer's staff and stood at the bow of the ship, ready to face the enemy. 1,000 meters. 500 meters. 100 meters. 30 meters. Heath, who had been waiting, finally launched an attack at this time. He raised the necromancer's staff in his hand high, and a large number of incantations came out of his mouth. The spell that he had been preparing for a long time was suddenly released. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of rushing wind could be heard. A gust of cold wind seemed to have suddenly blown over the surface of the sea. Suddenly, a ball of blue flame ignited in the skull at the top of the necromancer's staff. The flame surged out of the skull's eye sockets like water and fell into the surface of the sea. It was as if there was a layer of boiling oil floating on the surface of the sea. As soon as the blue flame fell, it quickly spread to the surroundings. The entire sea seemed to have been set on fire in an instant. A blood-red magic array that covered 1,000 meters appeared on the surface of the sea. The blue flame quickly wrapped around the corpses in the sea. However, a series of cracking sounds could be heard. All the sea beasts that were floating on the surface of the sea had woken up. It was the undead revival that Heath was used to. The army that suddenly appeared on the surface of the sea completely caught the whale lice and barnacles off guard. For a moment, they could only hear a loud pu-pu sound. Fresh blood splattered everywhere and the whale lice and barnacles were strangled to death. However, there were simply too many of them. Although Heath's ambush was effective in eliminating a large number of whale lice and barnacles, there were still more whale lice and barnacles charging over from behind. They came in groups, one after another, and there were countless of them. However, Heath himself did not intend to rely on just a little ambush to eliminate all of these beasts. After summoning the undead army, he quickly waved his fingers and controlled the undead army to form battle formations on the surface of the sea. He fought fiercely against the ocean army by surrounding, enclosing, and cutting them off. These were the military knowledge he had obtained from the military books left behind by Campbell. With the cooperation of the undead army, the power unleashed was immeasurable. Soon, through his continuous cutting and outflanking, the whale lice and barnacles that were charging at them were unknowingly squeezed together by him through the continuous transformation of their formation. Looking from the sky, an area surrounded by the undead sea beasts appeared in the sea. This area was filled with densely packed whale lice and barnacles. The sea beasts that were charging at them were basically all gathered here. It was impossible for the sea beast army that relied solely on Heath to resurrect to surround and destroy such an army. However, Heath did not intend to destroy them with just the dead sea beasts. Gathering them here was just to facilitate the release of the next spell. After gathering the whale lice and barnacles, Heath decisively began the release of the second spell. He stood on the deck of the bow and raised the necromancer's staff high in his hand. Large sections of incantations came out of his mouth, and the magic power in the magic pool surged toward the staff. As the incantation was released, a large dark cloud instantly appeared on the surface of the sea. Amidst the rolling dark clouds, lightning and silver snakes flickered incessantly. Crackling sounds rose and fell, and densely packed lightning and silver snakes gathered. When the last syllable fell, Heath decisively swung his high staff down. Lightning, God's punishment. The densely packed lightning and silver snakes gathered together to form an incomparably huge lightning pillar. It was like a giant lightning sword, piercing straight into the surface of the sea. Pi boom! A deafening boom sounded. The giant lightning sword slammed heavily into the surface of the sea, and then exploded. Countless lightning and silver snakes rolled out and rushed around like floodgates that were being opened. They tore at everything in this area of the sea crazily. The dazzling white light illuminated the sea brightly. Chapter 163, The Law. After a while, the wind stopped, the clouds stopped, and the dark clouds dispersed. The noisy sea seemed to have become silent at this moment. Heath stood on the deck and looked ahead. The sea in front of them had returned to silence. The whale lice and barnacles had all died on the surface of the sea, turning into charred corpses, piling up into a mountain that looked particularly spectacular. What Heath had just used was actually a typical element of spells that countered each other. In the wizard world, many elements had the effect of restraining each other. For example, the water element had a certain bonus to the fire element, and the lightning element had the same effect on the water element. The first circle spell, God's punishment alone, could not have been so powerful. However, it was on the surface of the sea. With the help of the conductive effect of the sea water, the energy of the spell had also been unleashed to the extreme, and because of that, it was able to deal such terrifying damage. Looking at the piles of charred corpses on the surface of the sea, Heath suddenly had an inexplicable feeling, as if he had understood something. It was an indescribable feeling, as if he had caught a glimpse of some knowledge and skills regarding the use of power in that moment, and the scene of the spell being released was naturally released back and forth in his mind. Heath knew that he had most likely entered the legendary state of epiphany. The path of wizards was not a curve that would always rise slowly. In fact, there were many aspects that would often show a leap in growth. The use of spells was the most typical example. After wizards learned a lot of spell knowledge, sometimes they would suddenly realize something deep. It was something about power and laws. Heath was ecstatic. Once this kind of epiphany happened, the wizard's use of power and level of spells would always rise to a higher level. However, this joy did not last long. He frowned again. He did not have time. The whale lice and barnacles just now were just small fries. The real catfish whale had not been shaken in the slightest. Heath could not cause such a giant creature any harm. The crisis had yet to be resolved, so there was no time for him to have an epiphany and think. Heath's brows were tightly knitted together. Who cared about the consequences? Should he stay and have an epiphany first? After all, such an opportunity was definitely something that could only be encountered by chance. It was purely dependent on luck and chance. Heath was fully confident that as long as he was given some time, he would definitely be able to benefit a lot from it. But the problem with the catfish whale? I guess I'll just have to run for my life first. After thinking about it for a while, Heath decisively suppressed the greed in his heart. No matter how big the opportunity was, he had to have his small life. That was equivalent to an existence at the level of an advanced level wizard. Why would he stay for an epiphany when he could not even run for his life? With this thought, Heath no longer hesitated. He started the wizard ship and left. However, although he was ready to let go of this opportunity, he was still reluctant to part with the magic in his heart. His mind kept replaying the scene when he cast the spell. He could not suppress it no matter how hard he tried. Heath tried several times but could not stop these thoughts. He could only give up. These thoughts were naturally released in his mind. At this moment, a strange thought suddenly popped up in his mind. What if he used extraction at this time? When he was meditating, he could use the system's extraction to extract additional elements. If he used extraction in this state where a large amount of knowledge was gathered, would it also? Thinking of this, Heath decisively said in his heart, "Extract." It was as if he paused for a moment. Following that, a clear notification sound came as promised. Beep, extraction successful. Elemental law attributes counter +1. As this voice sounded, a large amount of knowledge naturally surged into Heath's mind. It was all related to the elemental attributes. It was something deeper in the power level of this world. It really could be done. Heath was ecstatic. He had thought that he could only give up on the opportunity, but he had never thought that it would return to his hands in such a way. Splash! At this moment, the sound of intense water flow suddenly came from behind him. It was unknown what the catfish whale was doing. It seemed to have stirred the sea surface, causing huge waves that were 100 meters high to rise directly on the sea surface. This change instantly pulled Heath's head back to reality. Let's get out of here first. He quickly suppressed the thoughts of unearthing the knowledge in his heart, and hurriedly controlled the wizard ship to continue escaping. The knowledge was already in his head, so it was more important to escape now. Pang! 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 The wizard ship rampaged through the sea of corpses, and the corpses collided with the hull of the ship one after another. Heath stood on the deck, driving the wizard ship through groups of corpses, and sailed into the distance. His face was serious, and his brows were tightly furrowed. He did not relax at all, and instead looked even more nervous than before. He had read in detail about catfish whales, this demonized creature. This creature was vicious and vengeful. Once it targeted its prey, it would not easily give up. The only way to get rid of it now was to return to the sailing route as soon as possible. That was the contract signed between the wizards and the high-level sea folk. Even a giant creature like the catfish whale would not dare to easily go against it. Quick! Quick! Heath urged in his heart again and again. The power of the wizard ship had been pushed to the limit by him. Fortunately, he had already arrived at the vicinity of the route. This area was not far from the route. After going around for a while, Heath soon came to the front of the route. Heath relaxed his brows slightly and was about to steer the ship over. But at this time... Splash! A violent sound of water flow was heard. A huge shadow suddenly appeared under the sea and swam over at an extremely fast speed, then appeared on the surface of the sea. If it wasn't the catfish whale, then what was it? That catfish whale unexpectedly swam over at this time, blocking Heath's way. Heath frowned. Was this a coincidence? He quickly pulled the wizard ship to a stop and adjusted the course to take a detour. The catfish whale did not pay much attention to him and continued to lay lazily on the surface of the sea and devour the sea beasts' corpses. Soon, Heath took a detour to another entrance into the route. However, it was the same. Just as he was about to enter the route, the huge black shadow once again appeared on the surface of the sea. The catfish whale once again appeared in front of him and blocked Heath's path. Heath's face sank. Even a fool could see that the catfish whale was deliberately teasing him. Being seen through, the catfish whale did not care. Instead, it looked at Heath provocatively. Its expression was full of ridicule, just like a cat playing with a mouse. Heath's face became ugly. This was no longer a matter of whether he was angry or not. Being targeted by such a beast was really... Heath stood on the deck, his expression changing rapidly. A moment later, he took the nautical chart and looked at it carefully. Then, a fierce look flashed across his face. Damn it, you like to play, right? Then come on. With a fierce look in his heart, Heath decisively gave up on continuing to run for his life. Instead, he abruptly turned the bow of the ship and sailed towards a certain direction in the deep sea. After half an hour, suddenly... Splash! A strong sound of water flowing could be heard. In front of him, there was a strange scene. It was a waterfall. In the depths of the sea, there was a huge waterfall. Chapter 164, Arrival. This was a huge waterfall that stood in the middle of the ocean. There was no end to it on either side, and there was no end to it either. It was like a bottomless abyss, the end of the world. Because of the existence of magic, there were many wonders that violated the laws of physics in the ocean of this world, such as waterfalls and slopes. It was even said that there were seas that flowed upstream, seas that floated in the air, and so on. When they came near the waterfall in the sea, Heath controlled the wizard ship to stop. Although the area of the waterfall in the sea was wide, the speed of the current was not fast. Then, Heath adjusted the direction and slowly moved forward along the edge of the waterfall. The size of his ship was small, and the suction force of the waterfall was relatively weak, so it was fine to move like this. But the catfish whale could not do it. With its size, once it came close to a certain area, it would be sucked into the waterfall in the sea. With such a huge waterfall, even the catfish whale would not be able to escape unscathed, right? Everything was just as Heath had expected. Although the catfish whale did not have much intelligence, it still had a sense of danger. The waterfall was considered a dangerous area in the catfish whale's mind. Seeing that Heath was going over, it did not continue to chase after him. It was like a cat catching a mouse. Most of the time, it was not for its stomach, but just for fun. Heath let out a sigh of relief. The next step is to return to the correct route. From the chart, this waterfall stretched over 100 miles. It crossed the sea area of sea beasts and the route signed between wizards and the sea folk. As long as one followed the edge of the waterfall, they would be able to return to the route. I hope there won't be any more trouble. While praying silently in his heart, Heath controlled the wizard ship to set off towards the south route. As he walked forward, his line of sight couldn't help but look at the waterfall in front of him. Such a spectacular scene was definitely something he couldn't see on Blue Star. Even in the wizard world, it was rare. In order to better observe this scene, Heath turned the ghost ring and summoned the ghost scout from the ring. He controlled the ghost scout to fly to the top of the waterfall and observe it down. Standing at a high place, Heath could directly feel the enormous size of the waterfall. The bottom could not be seen at all. It was like an endless abyss. After the seawater flowed here, it all fell down. Even the sound of the seawater falling to the ground could not be heard. I wonder what's down here. There was not much information about this place. Heath only knew that this was a dangerous restricted area. There were many places in the wizard world that were filled with all kinds of dangers. Even if a wizard entered, it would be difficult for them to escape unscathed. This part of the area was designated as a dangerous area by the wizards, and this was one of them. This danger zone was called the Great Fall. On the surface, it looked like a waterfall, but in reality, it was a circular water hole, a large pit. However, due to the area being too large, only a small portion of it could be seen. This kind of place must be able to extract a lot of good things, right? This thought only flashed through his mind. This place was marked as a danger zone for high-level wizards by the wizards. Even many dark wizards who lived in the dark wizard region would not be able to reach this level. It was far beyond what he could touch at the moment. I'd better leave this place as soon as possible. Pulling back his thoughts, Heath's mind returned to sailing. Although he encountered some problems along the way, fortunately, they were all safe. After sailing along the edge of the waterfall for a few days, Heath finally returned to the correct route. At this point, Heath could finally be completely at ease. Before leaving this area of the sea, Heath stood on the deck and looked behind him. Before going out to sea, he would never have thought that he would encounter so much trouble on an ordinary trip home. He had almost stepped into a dangerous situation. This also reminded him that this world was very big. Even if he advanced to a wizard, he was only a small part of it. He was far from being able to be arrogant and complacent. I've been too relaxed during this period of time. This experience wasn't all bad. Ever since he advanced to a wizard, he had indeed been somewhat complacent. It was only because of his many years of self-discipline that he didn't show it. However, if this continued, it would more or less affect his training. With this experience, it could be considered as a wake-up call for him. Work hard in your training. Sooner or later, you will return here and bring that damn catfish to the hot pot. Even if it's this abyss, I have to go down and see what's going on. Heath silently encouraged himself in his heart. Wizard ship, cabin. Under the flickering flame, Heath was sorting out the gains from the previous 2 days. Danger often coexisted with wealth. Although it was indeed a little dangerous this time, the final harvest was unexpectedly rich. Heath had extracted more than 700 sea beasts in the catfish whale's hunting ground. Most of them were rare sea beasts on the market, and each of them gave Heath a considerable bonus to his attributes. In just those 2 hours, Heath's spiritual power had increased by 3 points, and his other physical attributes had also increased by 2 points. In addition, the life sequence and innate characteristics of these sea beasts were countless, greatly enriching Heath's own database. In addition, the most valuable parts of these sea beasts were also cut off by him. These rare species had a wide range of uses for wizards' experiments, so it was very easy to sell them for more than 100,000 magic stones. No wonder many wizards like to go to the danger zone to adventure. The profit margin is indeed not bad. Compared to these visible profits, what made Heath more concerned was those invisible things. Elemental law. Closing his eyes, Heath entered his spiritual sea. At this moment, there was a large section of strange knowledge in his consciousness. These were all knowledge and skills about the counteraction of elements. So that's how it is. Is there such a rule movement between the counteraction of elements? This is the Laurent arrangement mentioned in the book, right? No wonder I always felt strange when I read this paragraph in the past. So that's what it means. Soon, Heath sank into the study of spells. These techniques and knowledge could not be learned by wizards in books. Any wizard could only rely on their own learning process to naturally comprehend them. Whether they could learn it or not depended on their own luck and opportunities. The value was simply impossible to measure. However, these precious knowledge and techniques had been completely imprinted in Heath's spiritual sea. He only needed to spend a little time to master them and he would be able to easily grasp the profoundness of them. He believed that after these precious knowledge were completely integrated, his use of spells would definitely rise to a new level. There were no more accidents in the following voyage. Heath followed the route obediently, cultivating, learning magic, reading books, and extracting the sea beasts he caught every day. This kind of drifting continued for more than a month, and finally, his destination had arrived. Chapter 165, Friend. Firenberg, Rodan Kingdom. Firenberg was a knight's farm on the western border of Rodan Kingdom. Its original owner was a knight of the Lester family, and the new husband of the knight's wife was sitting here. In the bedroom. Hurry up, Rosa. Help me finish the damn wrinkles. We don't have much time. A loud young man's voice rang out. I'm trying my best, okay? If you're urging me, you can do it yourself. A dissatisfied female voice followed. Please, I hope you can understand. This is very important to me and to us. Whether I can become a baron depends on my performance at this banquet. Compared to the daughter of a knight, you also prefer to be called the daughter of a baron, don't you? All right, I will work hard. In the room, a tall and slender young man was standing in front of the appearance mirror and tidying up his clothes. A young girl of his age was helping the man put on his formal clothes, ruffling, trimming, and smoothing. Everything was meticulously done. Not long ago, a baron of the Portia family passed away unexpectedly and did not leave behind an heir. Furthermore, the inheritance rights of several members of the same family who were closer in bloodline were relatively close in rank. According to the law system, this kind of situation would be decided by the head of the Portia family. Therefore, Count Portia decided to hold a family banquet and invite the descendants of the family who had the right of inheritance to participate. During this banquet, the count would choose the heir. Standing in front of the mirror, Kayla looked at himself in the mirror. The nervousness on his face was obvious. This was the identity of a baron. Before this, Kayla did not even dare to think about it. Sir Baron, Sir Baron. Just thinking about these titles made Kayla so excited that he could not help himself. Moreover, Red Rock territory was famous for producing beauties in the entire western region and even the entire Rodan kingdom. It was even known as a beauties territory. It was said that even the king would go there to look for girls. Day. 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 At this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. Not long after, a beautiful maid appeared at the door. The maid bowed to Kayla and said, Master, there's someone visiting the manor, but there's no invitation. Kayla interrupted, there's no invitation. If there's no invitation, why are you telling me? Let him go back to where he came from. The maid hesitated for a moment and said, but he claims to be your friend, Master. Kayla was stunned. My friend? He asked, did he say what his name was? But after thinking for a moment, he continued, no matter who he is, tell him that I have something very important to deal with now. Kayla was quite self-aware. He was just a small apprentice knight who owned a farm. To be able to claim to be his friend, he must not have a very noble status. Yes. The maid agreed and quickly left. At the same time, Kayla finally finished tidying up his dress. Wish me luck, baby. Taking a deep breath, Kayla picked up his cane and prepared to leave with Rosa. The carriage was already waiting downstairs. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the balcony, with a half-joking tone. You look so handsome. Where are you going to seduce little girls? Kayla's footsteps suddenly stopped. He turned his head around in confusion, only to see that a figure had strangely appeared on the balcony, which was supposed to be empty. It was a man around his age. He looked around 20 years old, but he was very handsome. He had sword-like eyebrows, star-like eyes, sharp facial features, and a very rare black hair. He had quite a temperament. However, he was only wrapped in a black cloak. The cloak was covered with a layer of dust, which made him look travel-worn. Ah! Who are you? Rosa's pretty face turned pale, and she quickly hid behind Kayla. But after thinking for a while, she quickly shouted to the corridor, "Help! Hurry! There's an assassin, there's an assassin!" Rosa. Kayla held her hand. Kayla said, "Relax, baby. No one would be stupid enough to arrange an assassin on this matter, unless he plans to assassinate the entire Portia family." He paused and looked towards the balcony. His gaze was a little hesitant. "You look like a friend of mine." The man shrugged, seemingly dissatisfied with Kayla's description. "Looks like." Kayla finally confirmed it. He said, "All right, I'm sure now. You're that guy." Rosa was even more confused. She had been by Kayla's side for several years. She knew the kind of people around Kayla like the back of her hand. At least, she had never seen this friend standing on the balcony. And she looked at Kayla in surprise. Kayla looked as if he really saw his best friend. He couldn't help but smile. He couldn't take his eyes off the man on the balcony. Did nobles have friends? Maybe. But Kayla didn't have such an excited reaction to the social network around him. Before Rosa could react, Kayla said, "All right, you can go now. Ask the restaurant to bring out the best food and wine. I have a friend to serve." Rosa was stunned and quickly said, "We're not going to the banquet." Kayla said, "Yes, we're not going." Rosa's expression changed. "Hey, are you crazy? This is..." Kayla's tone became heavier. "Do as I say." Rosa frowned. "Yes, father." She bowed and turned to leave. After walking for a while, an image suddenly flashed in her mind, as if she felt that this scene had happened before. It seemed to be a few years ago in the afternoon. She went to visit a friend with Kayla. Finally, Rosa seemed to have thought of something, and her beautiful eyes widened. On the other side, in the room, Kayla walked to the balcony and complained, "Hey, buddy, is that what you learned over there?" Climbing over the wall and entering. Heath said, "The door insisted that I deliver the visiting card first." Kayla put on an angry look. "Who said that? I'll chop off his head later." Heath said, "They said that person's name is Kayla." Kayla laughed dryly. "Ha, ha, looks like I'll have to change my name." Heath laughed and said, "Forget it. I don't want to waste my energy trying to remember my friend's other name." Kayla suddenly raised his hand and punched Heath in the chest. He said loudly, "Do you know? Brother, we all thought that you abandoned us and forgot about this land. We all thought that you would never come back." After a pause, he pulled Heath over and gave him a big hug. "Welcome home, my friend." Chapter 166, Welcome. Although Heath did not deliberately spread the news, the nobles here soon learned of his return. For this reason, Count Portia's banquet was postponed by one day. The theme of the banquet was no longer selecting the heir, but instead, it was a celebration banquet to welcome Heath back. "Wizard? I can't believe it. That lord is really back? Is it the child who walked out of Greystone Castle? Is it him? He has grown into a big boy. He's very handsome. His eyes really fascinate me. I have fallen in love with him. Is he casting a spell on me? I really envy those people from Greystone territory." It was rare for wizards who walked out of the Forgotten Land to return, because crossing the strait required strength. For example, Heath had encountered a dangerous situation on this trip. If it was not for his strength, he would have died at sea. Other than that, ordinary ships could not cross the strait. Most of the apprentices who went out died before they had the ability to come back. Even if there were a few talented ones who could become advanced apprentices or even advanced to become wizards. At that time, the relatives they cared about were no longer in the world, so there was nothing worth them coming back for. Because it was rare, it was extremely precious. And because of that, this banquet was held with an unprecedented grandeur. Everyone that Heath knew and didn't know came to attend the banquet. Toasts were exchanged, cups were exchanged, fine wine, good food, beautiful music, enchanting dance. The most elegant and attractive side of the noble world was fully displayed in this banquet. "Sir Wizard, I want a magic potion that can make me beautiful. Can I? I want gold coins. I want a big house." At the banquet, Heath followed the tradition of collecting magic stones to satisfy the wishes of the mortals. In fact, the production of magic stones in the Forgotten Land was very small. It was not a loss to make a wish here, but it was basically not enough to earn a few magic stones. The yield was too low. However, for wizards, making a wish was not enough to earn magic stones. More importantly, it was a way to consolidate their rule. By making a wish, they could establish the values of wizards and let mortals know that wizards were omnipotent. Thus, they strengthened their faith in wizards. Every 10 years, there would be wizards coming here for this very reason. Heath's words had never been accepted by them in this regard. Originally, there was no need for him to make a wish, but he still did it. After all, although this place was not his hometown, it was still a place that gave him a second life. Now that he had developed, it was only right for him to return the favor, wasn't it? Of course. Because his ability was limited, Heath's wishes were only selectively fulfilled. He would usually give out magic stones that the other party could not afford, such as "I want to live forever" or "I want to be as rich as a country." As for those within his abilities, he would only receive one magic stone. Since he did not expect to earn any money, he would just treat it as publicity to protect the class. "Heath! Wizard! Heath! Wizard!" The people shouted Heath's name, drawing a perfect conclusion to the banquet. After resting for 2 or 3 days and relaxing for a while, Heath set off on his journey, heading to his destination. A few days later, in Greystone territory. Da-da-da! The crisp sound of horse hooves echoed on the small road in the countryside. More than 10 knights slowly rode out of the city gate of Greystone Castle. They were wearing green-grey leather armor and a woolen cloak, looking like they were about to go on a long journey. The knights passed through the wheat fields in the countryside and headed to the forest in the distance. Before entering the forest, they stopped in formation. Heath was at the front of the line. Beside him was a middle-aged man wearing a brown cashmere coat. His entire body exuded a noble aura. It was his former lord, Baron Carter. He should be called Earl Carter now. 6 years ago, the Baron used 2,000 magic stones to exchange for a piece of territory from Wizard Salado. After that, through his personal efforts and operations, he succeeded in becoming an earl. After Heath returned, his clothes, food, and accommodation were all taken care of by the earl. After knowing that Heath was going to the demonized forest, he had specially arranged a team to accompany him. After stopping the team, the earl said, "Heath, then I'll send you here." As a lord, he was already quite busy. Now that he had become an earl, his work was more than several times heavier than before. There were still many social engagements and official affairs waiting for him to handle. Heath said, "I've troubled you." Carter then explained to Kayla beside him that Kayla would lead Heath to the demonized forest this time. "Yes, you will not be disappointed. Don't worry, leave Heath to me." Earl Carter left very quickly. After taking him far away, Kayla came close to Heath's ear and whispered, "There are rumors outside that he does not intend to stop here. He has gained Portia's support, and most of Leicester is under his control. Although Upton is wavering, sooner or later, he will offer his loyalty to him. By then, he will have the entire river valley. Everyone says that sooner or later, he will return to Lionheart City and take back his great-grandfather's crown." Baron Carter's great-great-grandfather came from the royal family of the Rodan Kingdom. There were rumors that his great-great-grandfather was originally the heir to the throne, but his brother used disgraceful methods to make him lose the crown in the tournament. It was not known whether the rumors were true or not, but theoretically speaking, Carter had a certain degree of authority to inherit the throne of the Rodan Kingdom. Heath said casually, "Then what do you think? Will you draw your sword for him?" Kayla said helplessly, "I don't want to fight, but this is the title of king. If there really comes a day, I can only obey the edict." After a pause, he asked Heath again, "What about you? Hey, brother, you will help, right?" Heath said, "If the Count asks me, I will help him." Kayla said happily, "Haha, that's great. With your help, the Count will definitely be able to defeat that old man in the palace." Heath smiled and did not continue the conversation. He did not think that the Count would ask him for help for such a trivial matter. Yes, trivial matter. After extracting a lot of knowledge from the wizard world, Count Croya, Campbell, and even the Navy royal family, Heath's own vision was also broadened after extracting their scheming ways, and he could see clearly what he could not see before. Now that he thought about it carefully, Carter was actually a very ambitious person. He had long ago set his target on that crown. Training apprentice knights, developing territories, marriage and war, and even digging up greystone mines. All of these were progress with this as his goal. And after all these years of hard work, he had already developed a certain scale and climate. Even without Heath's help, he believed that he was very confident in getting what he wanted. Heath did not continue this topic. He patted Kayla's shoulder. Let's go. Chapter 167, Contract. 2 days later, in the depths of the dark cloud forest. Standing under a big tree, Kayla raised his head and looked at the dark cloud floating high in the sky. He asked in disbelief, Is this really alive? Heath, is this dark cloud really a living creature? Heath said, This is the definition of us wizards. Kayla pursed his lips. The definition of you wizards is really strange. After a pause, he asked, Then how should we help you? With a bow and arrow? But at such a height, even the best archer in the Rodan kingdom wouldn't be able to hook it. Heath said, Just stay far away and protect yourself. The main purpose of having Kayla and the others follow him was to be a guide and complete the chores of setting up camp and cooking. Heath didn't count on their help in combat. Heath did not waste any words. He cast a short spell and the flying spell was cast. Hula! A gust of strong wind suddenly swept over from all directions. It lifted Heath up slowly from the ground and flew into the sky. Kayla and the other knights opened their mouths wide when they saw this scene. Kayla said in surprise, This guy is really... It was not until this moment that he truly realized that he was different from Heath. This former good friend of his was already in a different domain from him. A domain that mortals could not enter. The flight spell carried Heath all the way up and soon arrived in the sky about 1,000 meters above the ground. There was a light grey cloud floating there, with a radius of about 100 meters. As Heath approached, the cloud immediately underwent a drastic change. The light grey quickly became darker and darker, and the entire dark cloud began to churn violently. It quickly shrank inside, as if a storm was coming. Then, a voice came from the dark cloud beast. Strange. Wizard. Stop. If you don't want to start a war. Heath stopped in front of the dark cloud beast. The dark cloud beast asked, Explain, your purpose. Heath went straight to the point, My wizard tower needs a guardian. I hope you can move there. We can provide you with more elements, and you can grow faster there. The dark cloud beast refused. Xavier has no master. Xavier is a free dark cloud. Heath said coldly, I'm not discussing with you, I'm ordering you. The grey clouds in the sky began to churn violently, and numerous densely packed silver snakes emerged from the black clouds. It screamed, Xavier does not accept any threats. If you do not want to leave, then fight with me. Xavier will defeat you. Heath said coldly, Then come. Without saying anything else, he raised his finger and pointed at the dark cloud beast. With a bang, a cluster of flames instantly blossomed from his fingertip and quickly flew towards the dark cloud in the sky. The dark cloud was like cotton. When the flame fell into it, it instantly spread to the surroundings at an extremely fast speed. In an instant, the entire dark cloud instantly burned up, becoming a veritable burning cloud. Ah! The dark cloud beast let out an angry scream. Wizard, you dare to offend Xavier, you have to pay the price. As it spoke, a bolt of lightning shot out from the cloud layer. With a crackling sound, it struck towards Heath who was in the sky. Seeing that he was about to be struck by the lightning, Heath's figure suddenly flashed and disappeared like a gust of wind, leaving only an afterimage in the air. It was the spell he had bought at the auction house, Gale. The lightning tore the afterimage into pieces and then heavily struck the ground. With a boom, a tree that could only be hugged by a few people was split in the middle, sparks flying everywhere. Kayla and the others who were watching this scene were terrified. Even if they had already hidden on a mountain in the distance, they were still afraid of such a terrifying supernatural force. Kayla said, Let's go further. The battle in the sky continued. Bolts of lightning streaked across the sky and tore through the sky, continuously attacking Heath. Heath relied on his spell Gale and his own strength to dodge left and right. If he really couldn't avoid it, he would summon his mimicry shield to protect himself. Although wizard-grade demonized beasts could grow to rank 2 at the most, the growth period was extremely long. For example, the demonized beast in front of him was only a wizard-grade demonized beast, and it was also at the early stage of the wizard realm. Its strength was on par with Heath. If it was an ordinary wizard, the demonized beast Dark Cloud could still rely on its powerful innate ability to gain the upper hand, but it could not do so in front of Heath. As a wizard, Heath's accumulation of knowledge in spells was far greater than that of an ordinary wizard. For wizards, knowledge was equal to power, and the corresponding power that Heath could use was greater than that of an ordinary wizard. Especially after he had comprehended the power of the law last time, Heath's mastery of spells had already jumped to a whole new level. Their strength was evenly matched, but Heath could use more power, so this battle naturally didn't have much suspense. The lightning that came down from the demonized Dark Cloud beast was all dodged and blocked by Heath. On the other hand, the attack that Heath used, the demonized Dark Cloud beast did not have any effective defensive measures, and it basically took the attack head-on. In his attacks, Heath had specially incorporated the element counter attribute that he had learned from the law. He had used all the elements that were arranged and combined to defend against the weaknesses of the Dark Cloud beast. Each attack could bring more damage. Fire, frost, poison. After rounds of attacks, the Dark Cloud beast was soon at the end of its path. Stop! Stop! Sir Wizard! Xavier! Xavier! Xavier admits defeat. Heath's heart voiced his disdain. Couldn't it have ended like this earlier? What a cheap person! The Dark Cloud beast was famous among demonized creatures for bullying the good and fearing the evil. Being kind to it would only cause it to despise and disdain you. The only way to conquer it was to beat it up. Heath said coldly, "Submit to me." A weak voice came from the Dark Cloud beast. "Submit. Xavier is willing to submit." "Great wizard." Heath nodded and took out a scroll from his dimensional pocket. This was a very huge scroll. It was about 1.5 meters tall, and its diameter was as thick as Heath's thigh. It was like a big pillar. It was a demonized contract scroll. It was a scroll that was specially used to sign contracts with demonized creatures. Heath casually put it down and the scroll floated in the air. He then gently drew on the scroll and runes lit up on the huge scroll. With a tearing sound, the scroll was slowly pulled open on both sides. The scroll was filled with mysterious runes. In the middle of the scroll was a row of grids. Heath raised his right hand and with a bang, a ball of faint blue soul flame ignited in his palm. He grabbed the ball of flame and pressed it on the scroll, leaving a spiritual mark in one of the squares. Heath then pushed the scroll towards the Dark Cloud beast. "It's your turn." "Yes. Yes, sir." As he spoke, the dark clouds churned, and then a bolt of lightning struck the scroll with a crackling sound, leaving the same symbol beside Heath's mark. When the two symbols were left behind, the runes that covered the top of the scroll lit up at the same time. Then, a strange scene appeared. Chapter 168, Contract. Black smoke suddenly rose from the scroll and quickly gathered in the air. With a bang, it began to burn. A large eye suddenly appeared amidst the burning flames. It had black vertical pupils and was completely covered in flames. Its appearance was somewhat similar to the eye of Sauron in The Lord of the Rings, but it was a little darker in color. There was also no extra emotion in its eyes, and it was extremely cold. This was the Eye of Witness, a product that would appear when a soul contract was made. It was one of the creations of the laws and was a part of this world. Its function was to witness the conclusion of the contract. Once the contract was concluded, any violation would be punished. A red beam shot out from the rotating eyeball and hit the scroll's signature bar. The signature on the scroll suddenly lit up with a beam of light. At the same time, Heath felt that he had established some kind of connection with the Dark Cloud beast. It was a connection in the soul. It seemed that he could control the life and death of the Dark Cloud beast at any time. He signed a master-servant contract with the Dark Cloud beast. This was the most common contract between wizards and demonized creatures. Once the contract was effective, the master could control the servant in all aspects. After the contract was signed, Heath put away the scroll. Then, he took out an inch-sized glass bottle, opened the cork, and aimed at the Dark Cloud beast. "Come in." Then, he recited a short spell. Suddenly, a strong suction force emerged from the glass bottle. Under the effect of this strong suction force, the dark cloud in the sky began to compress, transform, and quickly absorb into the bottle. The seemingly small bottle seemed to have an endless space, and in an instant, all the dark clouds were absorbed into it. The originally dark sky suddenly became clear. This was a spatial bottle, one of the spatial wizard tools. Unlike ordinary spatial wizard tools, this kind of spatial bottle could store living things. Of course, it was also much more expensive. The soul of the female apprentice in Marcel's hands in the magic bug forest used the same magic tool. It's finally done. After the contract was signed, there was no problem with the dark cloud beast. The next thing to do was to bring it back. However, there was no rush. It was rare for him to come back for 2 more days. Then, he slowly descended from the sky and returned to the ground. However, just as one of his feet landed on the ground, Heath's brows suddenly furrowed. What strong elemental fluctuations! For no reason, an extremely strong elemental fluctuation suddenly surged on the ground. The elemental content was not inferior to the energy intensity of a wizard. What's going on? Heath immediately became vigilant. He looked around and saw that a thick layer of grayish-black fog had suddenly appeared in the forest, devouring the entire forest. When he carefully observed, he found that the grayish-black fog was actually full of elemental particles. In other words, the black fog in front of him was entirely caused by the excessive abundance of elemental particles. Heath frowned. No way, did he poke an elemental spring's eye? Such a dense elemental strength was rare even in the wizard continent. It was truly inconceivable for such a strong elemental to appear in such a forgotten land. In the rising black smoke, some demonized beasts and small animals in the forest could not even hold on and fell to the ground. Seeing this scene, Heath could not help but frown. Shit, Kayla and the others. As a wizard, he certainly did not mind in front of such an element, but Kayla and the others were only ordinary humans. Such a strong element was a fatal threat to them. He quickly looked around and soon saw a flag on a mountain in the distance. He immediately cast a flying spell and arrived at the mountain. At this time, Kayla and the others had already passed out. Their faces were black, and there were blue blood vessels appearing on the surface of their skin. It looked particularly terrifying. This was a sign of elemental erosion. If this happened, they would not be far from death. Heath quickly took out a few test tubes from his dimensional pocket and fed them to Kayla and the rest. This was elemental fusion water, which could allow one to possess elemental constitution for a short period of time. After drinking the liquid in the test tubes, Kayla and the rest gradually looked better. Seeing this, Heath's expression relaxed slightly. He pushed Kayla. Kayla, hey! After shouting twice, the unconscious Kayla gradually woke up. He looked around blankly. What? What happened? What happened? I still have to ask you. Heath asked, do you still remember what happened before? Kayla frowned and recalled for a moment. He said with some uncertainty, I remember. I remember that we seemed to be watching you fight with that dark cloud. We seemed to see that you had just defeated the dark cloud, but a cloud of black fog suddenly surged out from the forest. Oh right, I remember now. A cloud of black fog suddenly appeared in the forest. The black fog came too quickly. I accidentally inhaled it and felt dizzy. After that, I don't remember. Heath frowned. He asked, you mean, the black fog appeared after I subdued the dark cloud beast? What else happened? At this time, a knight who had just woken up pointed to a direction in the forest and said, over there, Sir Wizard. I saw something over there. It seemed to be a child. Another knight also said, I saw it too, sir, and I also heard the laughter of a child. Ah, did you hear it too? I thought it was an illusion. Heath was slightly stunned when he heard the knight's words. He looked in the direction the knights were pointing at. It was a forest in the distance. It seemed to be no different from the scenery in other parts of the forest. Kayla asked, did something happen, Heath? Heath said, there might be something over there. I need to go over and take a look to be sure. Kayla puffed out his chest and said, do you need our help? Heath shook his head and said, no need. You guys leave the forest first. I can handle it here on my own. The elemental fusion water had a certain time limit. Under Heath's repeated requests, Kayla could only take the knights and leave. After Kayla and the others left, Heath took out the spatial bottle and released the dark cloud beast inside. The moment the dark cloud beast appeared, Heath could clearly feel the elements gathering towards the dark cloud beast, as if there was a suction force on its body that was attracting them. Seeing this, Heath could not help but ask, Xavier, do you know what's going on? Xavier was obviously at a loss. No. I don't know. Master. Heath said in surprise, these elements are all converging towards you. Xavier was also very puzzled. From Xavier's memories, it's like this, they let Xavier, food, grow. Hearing Xavier's words, Heath's eyes lit up, as if he suddenly thought of something. He hurriedly used the flying spell to fly high in the sky, and then looked down from the sky. At this glance, he suddenly came to a realization. Heath said, so that's it. Chapter 169, Secret Realm. There was a magic array hidden in the forest. From the structure of the magic array, it looked like a typical elemental gathering magic array. It was usually found in training spaces such as wizard towers and meditation rooms. I see. No wonder the dark cloud beast can survive in such a place. Heath had been curious before. The dark cloud beast was a pure elemental magic creature, so it could not live without elements. Now it seemed that the reason why it could survive in the Forgotten Land, where the elements were scarce, was because of this magic array. This magic circle was centered around the dark cloud beast. The gathered elements were sent to the dark cloud beast, and the dark cloud beast used it to absorb the elements and grow. It was like a feeding machine. Is this a feeding machine specially made for the dark cloud beast? Heath suddenly remembered that he had heard people in the castle talk about the dark cloud beast being raised by a wizard in Greystone Castle. Now it seemed that this rumor was not just a rumor. But is this really just a feeding machine? Heath's gaze swept across the forest below. At this moment, he could still see a layer of greyish-black fog in the forest. This was because he had just put the dark cloud beast into a spatial bottle. The gathered elements could not be absorbed, so they were piled up. However, it had only been a short while since he had put the dark cloud beast away. Heath rubbed his chin and pondered, such violent elements should not be as simple as an elemental gathering magic array, right? The Forgotten Land was a place where the elements were exhausted. In such a place, it was impossible to gather so many elements with just an elemental gathering magic array. It must also require magic stones, elemental powder, elemental plants, and other materials that could produce large amounts of elements. In other words, there should be something hidden here. What was it? Wizard Tower? Ruins? Secret Realm? Or a wizard's secret treasury? Heath was excited. No matter what it was, there must be hidden resources here. Not to mention other things, just these materials that could produce large amounts of elements were a lot of money. Let me see what's hidden underneath. With this thought in mind, Heath immediately began to dig into the secrets in front of him. He was already very familiar with the reverse derivation of magic arrays. Looking down at the magic array from above, Heath quickly determined the specific structure of the magic array. Then, he extended his spiritual tentacles towards the magic array. This was a wizard-level magic circle, and the person who set it up should be a wizard. His actual strength was unknown, but judging from the knowledge of runes used in the magic array, he should be at the level of a low-level wizard. He tampered with the runes and adjusted the arrangement. Soon, the wizard-level magic array was completely dismantled by him. After the magic array was dismantled, Heath slowly landed on the ground and walked towards the center of the magic array. This was a small forest, surrounded by lush trees. The grass and vegetation on the ground were also flourishing, but there was an empty space here. Heath walked into the empty space. He looked at the empty space in front of him, raised a finger, and a wisp of flame shot out from his fingertip. He raised the flame and drew a line towards the center of the empty space in front of him. The flame drew a smooth arc in the air and landed in the center of the empty space. With a bang, as if something had been ignited, the flame started to burn straight up in the air. Not long after, a door appeared in the center of the empty space. It was a broken wooden door. It looked like it had been there for many years. It was covered in mottled moss, and the wood was heavily decayed. It was definitely all rusted. It stood alone in the forest, looking very strange. A secret realm. I didn't expect it to be a secret realm. Heath was very excited at this moment. This was because it was very likely to be a secret realm, and the wooden door in front of him was the entrance to this secret realm. One had to know that even if a secret realm was small, the wealth inside was also very considerable. What good stuff can there be? Thinking excitedly, Heath immediately walked forward. The wizard's hand opened, turned the door handle, and pushed it in. Creak. The sound of rusty rivets turning was heard. The wooden door slowly opened. What appeared in front of Heath was a long corridor, similar to the one in the castle. There were no unnecessary decorations on either side of the corridor, only a layer of carpet was spread on the floor. Heath first turned the ghost ring and summoned the ghost scout to explore the corridor. At the same time, he tried his best to scan the inside of the corridor with his spirit net. It was better to be cautious when dealing with treasures. This was a wizard's nest. There might be traps inside. Nothing. There's no protection at all. However, what made Heath feel strange was that the ghost scout did not find anything special after walking around. He was worried and used his mind power to scan the area, but he did not find anything. Facing this good news, Heath not only did not relax, he became even more cautious. There must be something wrong. Logically speaking, a wizard should be comfortable in their training ground. They would guard every step they took and guard every 5 steps they took. The densely packed protection was so strong that if an outsider dared to step in recklessly, they would be bombarded into pieces by magic. However, this place was empty, as if inviting him into a trap. It was really a little strange. Everyone is a wizard. Be careful and I'll be fine. With 120% spirit, he walked into this corridor. While carefully observing his surroundings, Heath tried to recall the clues about the wizard here in his mind. There were not many things about this wizard. Heath only remembered that he seemed to be a local wizard from the Ike continent. He also tested his elemental constitution when he was young and went to the wizard continent. However, for some unknown reason, he came back later and went into the forest alone. Since then, there was no news about him. This seems to be the wizard tower of that wizard. There were rows of rooms on both sides of the corridor. There were all kinds of materials and experimental specimens in the rooms. It was obviously the place where the wizard had lived for a long time. Wormwood grass, withered spirit flower, fruit on the back of the head, cow grass. Even snow apples. Heath walked into a room and his eyes lit up when he saw the materials on the table. These were some of the magic materials commonly used in wizard experiments. Indeed, their level shouldn't be too high. They probably just advanced. Although these materials were all wizard grade, they were basically only used by newly advanced wizards. Most likely, they were like him, a wizard who had just advanced not too long ago. Why would a newly advanced wizard come here to build a tower? Heath was even more confused. Heath could understand why he came back to visit after advancing to a wizard, but he couldn't understand why the other wizard had come back for a long time. After all, this was the land of elemental exhaustion, and it was difficult for a wizard to improve in such a place. After going through 2 rooms, Heath came to a sealed stone room. This was a standard meditation room, and there were a lot of magic stones, low-level magic materials, and so on in the stone room. There was a magic array set up below. Through these materials as a primer, a large amount of the surrounding elements could be gathered. This could raise the concentration of the elements here to a certain level, which was the source of the elements outside. However, when Heath saw the structure of the magic array below, his expression became even more strange. Strange? The core isn't here. Logically speaking, the function of this magic array was to gather the elements in this room and increase the concentration of the elements here for the wizard to train. However, the other party modified the last step, changing the core to the dark cloud beast outside so that the large number of elements gathered here would be transmitted to the dark cloud beast outside through a track. All the elements were sent out, and there was no reservation here. The elements have all been sent out, so does the wizard not cultivate any more? With a belly full of doubts, Heath continued to explore the past. After passing through 2 rooms, he came to a spiral staircase, and followed the spiral staircase all the way up to a room. When he entered the room and saw the interior of the room, he was stunned. Chapter 170, Shadow. It looked like a bedroom. There was a wooden table, a cabinet, a big bed in the middle, and a balcony next to it. There was a round table on the balcony, and a wooden chair beside the table for afternoon tea. At this moment, there was a figure sitting on the chair. To be exact, it was a skeleton. It looked like it had been dead for God knows how long. Some dried bacon was hanging on the pale skeleton, and a tattered cloak was draped over it. Is this the wizard? Heath could still feel faint elemental fluctuations from the skeleton. It was obvious that it belonged to the level of a wizard. Heath spread out his spiritual tentacles and scanned the surroundings. After confirming that there were no traps or other dangers, he walked forward. There was a notebook on the round table. It was obvious that it had been there for many years, but it was still intact, probably because it had been enchanted with magic. It was just covered with a thick layer of dust. Heath blew away the dust on it and picked up the notebook to open it. It was a diary that recorded the life of this wizard. However, what Heath did not expect was that the first sentence caught his attention. Ha ha ha, I passed the test. I can become a wizard now. Siguruma Wizard Academy, I'm here. Heath was stunned. Siguruma Academy. This was a very famous academy on the west coast. There were even some stigmata-level wizards, and it was the only wizard organization on the west coast that had stigmata-level wizards. Heath had also obtained the dazzling wizard relic from this wizard organization. However, this wizard organization had been extinct for more than 1,000 years, and the situation was somewhat similar to that of Shadow Tower. It seemed that the higher-ups had all been wiped out during a certain expedition, and then the enemy came to find them, and they were all slaughtered. The remaining members were either dead or escaped. However, the specific details of the destruction of their higher-ups were not clear, only mentioning that they were exploring a certain secret plane. Did this wizard escape to this place to avoid disaster? Heath continued reading. The diary described the student's experience of going to the West Coast continent to study. The owner of the diary was called Victor. Like most apprentices, Victor was brought to the Wizard Academy after he was tested for wizard talent. Then, he began to accept various missions to earn magic stones, meditate, buy materials to learn spells, and so on. The resources of the Siguruma Academy were determined by talent. The higher the talent, the more resources were given. Victor's luck was not bad. He was born with a high-level talent, so he could get more resources. In addition, he was also quite hard-working, so his strength was constantly improving. Low level, intermediate level, and advanced level, it seemed that he was going to advance to a wizard soon. But at this time, something unexpected happened. There's a rumor that something has happened to Lord Magus Brent and the others. This must be the nonsense of those jealous villains. Lord Brent is a stigmata wizard. How many people in this world are his match? Heavens, something has really happened to Lord Magus Brent and the others. They were completely annihilated in the mysterious sea area. It's over. I heard that the Ice Queen of the Frost Castle has returned from the sealed land. She's Lord Magus Brent's sworn enemy. What should we do? Should we fight to the death? But I don't want to die yet. Everyone is running away. It seems that I have to make preparations as soon as possible. Mysterious sea area? I see. The reason that led to the destruction of the Siguruma Academy back then was because of the mysterious sea area. There were 4 extremely dangerous and mysterious places in the wizard world. They were the Mysterious Sea, the Death Desert, the Dark Forest, and the Polar Ice Field. It was said that these places were the kind of places that would eat people without spitting out their bones. Even high-level wizards did not dare to set foot in them easily. However, danger often meant profit. It was said that there were countless rare treasures growing in these places. Some of them were even sought after by stigmata wizards. Therefore, there were many wizards who tried to get rich overnight to explore these places all year round. It was worth mentioning that legend had it that the great fall that Heath had seen on the sea was a way to the mysterious sea area. Heath continued to read. What happened next was logical. The death of the higher-ups and the enemy coming to find them. The Wizard Academy must have been cleansed from top to bottom, which was similar to what Heath had read in the book. Is it the Frost Castle that destroyed them? No wonder it has such a huge amount of energy. The Frost Castle was a wizard organization on the same level as the Tower of Order, and it was said that their strength was much stronger than the Tower of Order. They belonged to one of the top wizard organizations in this world. From the diary, the Frost Castle was extremely ruthless. They had completely eliminated the Siguruma Academy. Because of this, although Victor was lucky enough to escape from this calamity, he did not dare to show his face in the wizard continent anymore. Thus, he hid back in his hometown and built a wizard tower in a secret realm that he found by chance. However, this was the land of elemental exhaustion. Victor did not have too many resources, so it was destined that his cultivation would be difficult. During this period, although he had gone out a few times to search for materials and resources, not only could he not find the materials and resources, but he was also chased and hunted everywhere, so he could only hide back. The efforts that lasted for a period of time did not have much effect, and in the end, his life force was completely exhausted. Seeing that there was not much time left, Victor could only give up and adjust the core of the magic array at the end of his life, feeding the elements to his only demonized beast, which was the dark cloud beast outside. Now that things have come to this, I no longer have any expectations. I only hope that I can spend my old age here peacefully. The only regretful thing is that it was not easy to complete the shadow. This is the greatest pride of my life as a wizard. So, I left all of this here. If a wizard comes here, I hope that this spell can be passed down and let this world remember that there was a wizard who came to this world. His name was Victor. The diary ended here. In the skeleton's hand was a scroll made of sheepskin. Similarly, this scroll had been cast with spells, and because of this, it had not been damaged for so long. Heath took it and looked at it. This was a spell scroll that recorded the shadow mentioned in Victor's diary. Victor was a wizard who was relatively talented in spells. In addition to the abundant resources provided by the tower, he was able to accumulate a large amount of knowledge before advancing to a wizard, and successfully combined this knowledge to form his own spell system. And Shadow was a spell that he had created with his own spell system. Holding the scroll, Heath was in a great mood. He did not expect to have such a great harvest this time. Not to mention the pile of magic stones and materials outside, which was at least 100,000 magic stones and materials. He had even obtained a wizard-level spell scroll. This kind of luck could not be stopped. Out of respect for the deceased, Heath bowed to the body of the deceased and carefully put away the scroll. Chapter 171, Complete. Shadow was a spell that combined shadow, force field, and space. The effect of the spell was to nurture a shadow to help him in battle. The strength of the shadow's battle depended on the wizard's own spiritual power level. According to the scroll, it could reach up to more than 200 degrees. More than 200 degrees. This was a level that only mid-stage wizards could have. A wizard could cast it in the early stages, which showed the level of this spell. In addition, this spell had an even more powerful ability. Teleportation. This spell used a large amount of spatial knowledge structure. Wizards could transfer themselves and the shadow to complete the shift in position. After the replacement, they could also detonate the shadow and cause damage within a small area. Summoning, teleportation, and attack. 3 in one single combat spell. And this was what Heath lacked the most at the moment. After becoming a wizard, whether it was God's Punishment or Hellfire Sea, they all dealt AoE damage in a large area. Although these spells had powerful attacks and high energy, they basically had a strong chanting period. They performed well on large-scale battlefields, but they were actually not that useful in a one-on-one fight. With this spell, his combat ability was believed to be able to rise to another level. And because of this, after returning from the forest, Heath immediately began to learn Shadow. Rodan Kingdom, Heath Farm. After leaving the forest, Heath returned to his farm. During these years, the farm had been taken care of by Elisa. Under the care of this little girl, the farm was also well organized. After Heath returned, he specially set aside a room as a laboratory. At this moment, in the laboratory, on the long square wooden table, there were all kinds of messy glassware. In the middle was a big black pot. At this time, bubbles were popping out of it, and the yellowish-brown liquid was boiling non-stop. Heath stood in front of the black pot and was pouring all kinds of materials into it. The powder of wormwood, shadow flower, and sunshine fruit. The weight of the sunshine fruit is... He snapped his fingers lightly and a notebook appeared in his hand with a bang. He opened the notebook and looked at the ingredients recorded in advance. The sunshine fruit powder is 120 grams. He picked up the sunshine fruit powder that he had prepared beforehand and put it on the scale to measure it. After verifying that there were no mistakes, he threw the sunshine fruit powder into it. When the sunshine fruit powder fell into it, the originally yellowish-brown liquid suddenly turned into a thick, pure black color, just like oil. Finally, the blood, hair, dander, and soul of the wizard. Heath picked up a silver needle from the table. He pricked his fingertip and squeezed out a drop of blood, dripping it into the big pot. Then, he poured hair, dander, and other substances into it. Finally, he picked up a short-handled magic wand and stirred it gently. As he stirred, he placed one hand on the black pot and chanted a long incantation. As the incantation was chanted, the black liquid in the black pot suddenly emitted a bright light and became colorful. That was when the materials inside began to take effect. As Heath chanted the incantation, he stirred the black pot like a chef making soup. After a long time, the liquid in the black pot began to decrease bit by bit, finally turning into a lump of black matter. Then, a strange scene appeared. Woo! The small lump of black matter suddenly began to emit waves of strange sounds, then distorted and changed shape, trying to climb out of the black pot like a living creature. At the same time, Heath's spiritual power also inexplicably had an additional connection with the shadow. This connection was not a foreign body connection like the dark cloud forest. Instead, it was a direct physical connection like the half-life soul. It was like an extra organ in the body, which could be controlled at will. This was the shadow. The shadow was cultivated using the wizard's own soul and cells. When the cultivation was successful, the shadow would be a part of the wizard's body, which was equivalent to having an extra organ in the wizard's body. Heath picked up the dagger and gently cut a hole in his palm. Then he put his hand in front of the shadow. Like a cat that smelled home, the shadow immediately went into the hole in Heath's palm and quickly merged into his blood. Heath immediately tried it. His gaze fell on the table and with a thought, a black shadow appeared on the table. He tried to control the black shadow. Whether it was distortion or deformation, it was easy to complete. Success. Feeling happy, Heath continued his work and continued to cultivate more shadows. The small shadow in front of him was only a small part of this spell. It was like a brick in the castle. To complete the entire spell, he needed to cultivate hundreds or thousands of such shadows. Fortunately, it was relatively easy to cultivate shadow clones. As long as the materials were complete, it was not difficult to cultivate them. The success rate was almost 90%. As long as one was willing to spend time and energy, it was still very easy to cultivate it. 2 months later. It's finally completed. Standing in the middle of the room, Heath heaved a long sigh of relief. His tone was filled with uncontrollable joy. At this moment, there was a black shadow in front of him. It was a blurry black figure. It looked somewhat similar to him, as if it was his shadow. The difference was that this shadow was three-dimensional, like a sculpture of him. Heath closed his eyes and thought at the same time. Immediately, the black shadow began to have more colors. It was as if the sculpture was painted with oil, and the blurry image became clear. At the same time, the original Heath suddenly became blurry, and the color on his body disappeared into grey at any time. In the blink of an eye, the two were replaced. Opening his eyes, Heath, who was already in the middle of the room, looked around and was very satisfied. Teleportation. Then, he measured the specific control distance of the shadow around 30 yards. In other words, he could complete teleportation within the range of 30 yards. Do not think that this distance was very short. Teleportation was an extremely complicated spell. It involved the structure of space, the transfer of elements, and so on. It was already amazing if a normal teleportation spell could reach 10 yards, the number of spells that did not rely on wizard tools to transfer was even rarer. Even the related knowledge was rarely left behind. Space spells were basically one of the most advanced and complicated spells in the wizard world. This series of knowledge was considered high-level knowledge in any wizard organization, including Shadow Tower. Only a top-level wizard organization like the Siguruma Academy could do this. In short, it was definitely not easy to complete teleportation within 30 yards. Although this distance was not long, it was more than enough for a small-scale battle. Think about it, when the other party was determined to attack, he would suddenly disappear and appear behind the other party to launch a fatal attack. It must be a wonderful scene. The days suddenly became leisurely, and Heath ushered in his rare time off. Chapter 172, Level Up. During the following period of time, Heath stayed in the manor to cultivate the shadow, cultivate, and organize the harvest during this period of time. Occasionally, when he was tired, he would deal with the nobles who came to visit him, or accept the nobles' invitation to go to a ball or hunt, but generally only the nobles who were familiar with him could enjoy this treatment. The Count, Kayla, and so on. Of course, when he went to the banquet, he would also bring them some small gifts, such as those that could increase a certain amount of vitality, and those that could increase a person's resistance, etc. The days passed day by day in such a busy and fulfilling process. 3 months later, the largest port on the eastern coast, White Harbor. On the long dock, a black-cloaked Heath was standing at one end of the dock, and on the other side were Kayla and the others who came to see him off. Since he had already obtained the dark cloud beast, Heath naturally had no reason to stay here any longer. After resting for a few months, he was ready to return to the wizard continent. After all, the exhausted elements here were not suitable for cultivation. Kayla said, "Heath, my friend, are you sure you don't want to stay for a longer period of time? I also want to introduce you to the 2 young ladies of Cyril Castle. They are twins." Heath said with disdain, it's you who wants to get to know them. After so many years, Kayla had not changed at all. The biggest goal of his life was still to be with a woman. After the mother and daughter of the Lester family, he had gotten to know many young ladies over the years, both in and out of the territory. Kayla smiled embarrassedly and said, "I still need to thank you. Otherwise, the young ladies of the Viscount family would not be able to recognize me." Heath said, "Be more confident. You are already a baron now." There was no suspense. After Heath returned, Count Portia quickly confirmed Kayla as the heir to the title. As a return gift, Heath gave him a bottle of magic potion that could alleviate aging and prolong life. He had never forgotten the one magic stone that Kayla had given him back then. Aside from Kayla, Heath had also given some benefits to those who were close to him. Every apprentice knight who had fought alongside him back then had been given a bottle of gold blood, some training materials for knights, and so on. Meanwhile, Elisa, who was by his side, he had given her a farm and potions that could keep her young. Kayla said, "Compared to that, I care more about the title of wizard's friend. That is the proudest thing in my life, haha." After a pause, he asked, "When will you come back next time?" Heath shook his head. "It depends. When I'm free, I'll definitely come back." Kayla nodded. "All right then. Come back more often if you are free. There will always be a place for you here." After leaving Kayla and the others, Heath immediately boarded the wizard ship and embarked on the return journey. On the deck, Heath, who was holding a compass, was giving orders to the wizard ship. Wind speed 26 knots, humidity 32 degrees. Full port, put away the rope. Set sail. Because of the storm, Heath found a lot of sailing knowledge to extract after disembarking. It was obvious that he was not as ignorant as before. Adjusting the course, controlling the speed, determining the direction of the wind. After setting the autopilot, Heath returned to the cabin. Meditation candle. Elemental water. Nesser fruit. Taking out the materials used in meditation one by one, Heath made preparations before meditation. After everything was arranged, he summoned the system panel. System. Whoosh. The familiar light blue virtual panel appeared in front of him. It was the system panel that had accompanied him for many years. At the bottom of the panel, the word upgrade was particularly eye-catching. Staring at the light blue panel, Heath fell into deep thought. His eyes seemed to be filled with hesitation. After a while, he seemed to have finally made up his mind. He said, "Upgrade. Beep, confirm whether you want to upgrade the system. Estimated time for upgrade is 10 years, PS, during the upgrade, the system's extraction function will be suspended, .. Heath said, "Confirm. Beep, the system has started to upgrade. The upgrade progress is 0.0001%. As soon as Heath finished speaking, a long progress bar appeared on the virtual interface. Next to it was the progress of the upgrade. 10 years. That's a long time to wait for. After thinking for a long time, he finally made the decision to upgrade the system. The main reason was that after advancing to a wizard, the spiritual force required to increase one's strength was too high, and the current extraction efficiency of the system could no longer give him much of an advantage. 10 years it is. As long as I can increase my efficiency, this little wait is worth it. Shaking his head, Heath closed the system interface. 10 years seemed like a long time, but for a wizard's life, it was only 10 years of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. As for how to spend these 10 years, Heath already had a complete plan, and that was seclusion. After returning to the wizard continent this time, he decided to start his seclusion. After all, the materials he had accumulated now were enough for him to hoard for more than 10 years. After passing through the 10 years of an empty window from the system, he would avoid the chaotic war in the land of darkness. 10 years, I wonder if I can reach the intermediate stage of the wizard. No. At least the intermediate stage of the wizard. Standing in front of the round window, Heath stared at the waves outside, thinking with great ambition. The war in the land of darkness was still going on, and it had entered a white-hot stage. Wizards fought against wizards for resources, for the land of resources, and mortals fought against wizards for territory, power, and wealth. Large areas of land were scorched and corpses littered the ground. Villages and towns were destroyed one after another in the war, but the people who survived showed no signs of stopping. They continued to fight, and everyone's eyes were bloodshot. Every day, there was news of a wizard organization being attacked in the Underdark Tresia, news of a wizard organization challenging someone, and news of a wizard organization being destroyed. It was the same in the human world. Every day, there was news of a war between a country and a country, news of a territory launching a sneak attack on another territory, news of a king being beheaded, and so on. Some people wore crowns, some had their heads chopped off, and some even died in the wilderness. The whole world seemed to have turned into a colosseum, and every day, there were rounds of fighting beasts and rounds of elimination. No one knew when such elimination would come to an end. It seemed to be a distant future. Chapter 173, The Forest. Heath's life began to enter a period of tranquility. Every morning, he would wake up at dawn and meditate. He would continue to train as a knight until dawn. After breakfast, he would read some books and study some spells. He would continue until lunch. After lunch, he would rest for an hour or two and take a nap. After that, he would start meditating in the afternoon and continue until night. Then, he would meditate once and train as a knight. Then, he would finish the day's schedule. Of course, this was not completely unchanged. Occasionally, he would be attracted by a certain spell while he was studying spells. He would also adjust the pace of his cultivation for the day to increase the amount of time he spent studying spells. Or, when he suddenly had an idea and wanted to do an experiment, he would also set aside time to do the experiment. Over the years, with the help of the system, his strength had been improving by leaps and bounds. In fact, a lot of knowledge had been forced into his mind. Although he had learned it, his grasp of it was actually not very reliable. Now, taking advantage of this opportunity, Heath also happened to master this knowledge thoroughly and thoroughly. Practice, study, practice the sword, experiment. Heath spent most of his time on these few projects, and every day was very fulfilling. Days passed in such fulfilling ways. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. Underdark Treesia, Golden Apple Forest. Golden Apple Forest was a wonderful fruit forest in the northwest part of the Underdark Treesia. It was said that there was a strange kind of apple tree growing in the forest. It was said that this kind of fruit tree would only bear fruit once every 10 years, and only one fruit would grow at a time. The apple that grew out of it was golden, so it had this name. It was said that this kind of fruit could not be seen during the day, and only in the dark would it emit a very bright golden light. If someone found this golden apple and ate it, they would obtain the power of a wizard, and they would be immortal and young forever. At this moment, the night was thick, and in the Golden Apple Forest, a figure was moving quickly through the forest. Da-da-da-da. The crisp sound of footsteps echoed in the forest. Heath, who was wearing a black cloak, jumped from the top of a tree to the top of another tree. He kept turning his head and scanning the forest, as if he was looking for something. His goal for this trip was precisely this kind of golden apple. Recently, the church had sent him a potion formula in the direction of vitality. He was more interested in it and planned to try to make it. And he needed to use the material of the golden apple. At this moment, Heath's gaze suddenly fell in a direction. He saw that in the depths of the forest, a faint layer of golden light could be faintly seen. It was particularly dazzling in this pitch-black forest. Heath's eyes lit up. I found it. He hurriedly looked in that direction. After passing through a row of trees, he came to an open space. The grass and vegetation in this open space were flourishing, but there were no extra trees around. There was only an apple tree. And on this apple tree, there was only one apple, and this apple was golden. At this moment, it was emitting a golden light. Golden apple. The records of the golden apple in the human world roughly matched the characteristics of the golden apple. The difference was that the golden light of the golden apple was actually an elemental light, and ordinary humans could not see it. Moreover, the golden apple itself had a certain level of spirit attack. Ordinary humans would be hypnotized by its consciousness when they approached it, and they would not be able to discover its existence. After a few ups and downs, Heath arrived in front of the golden apple tree. Just as he approached, the golden light suddenly rose. At the same time, Heath immediately felt a violent vibration in his spirit. It was the golden apple's self-protection method. When it sensed danger, it would naturally release a strong spiritual force field to defend itself. The strength of this spiritual force field was almost as strong as a wizard's spell. It was far from what an ordinary apprentice could withstand. Usually, the apprentices who came to collect the golden apple would wear special protective wizard gear. However, it was not so troublesome for an official wizard. Just as the spiritual force field was attacking him, the half-life soul in Heath's spiritual sea naturally spilled out and protected his spiritual sea seamlessly. In the past 10 years, Heath had made many improvements to the half-life soul. At this moment, the thickness of the half-life soul had reached more than 1 meter. It was as hard as a city wall and was far from being broken by this little spiritual force field. After the half-life soul surged up, the spiritual force field of the golden apple completely lost its effect. Heath then reached out his hand to pick the golden apple. At this moment, "Wa. No. No. Don't eat me. Don't eat me. Ruth doesn't want to be eaten." A childlike cry sounded. A little girl's facial features suddenly appeared on the face of the golden apple. At this time, she was crying loudly with her mouth open. At the same time, there was a series of clattering sounds around. The branches on the apple tree suddenly squirmed for no reason, and a large number of them swept towards Heath. Humph! Heath snorted lightly, and the wizard's force field was instantly released. The branches that rushed over were instantly frozen by him. At the same time, he pulled out the dagger on his waist, and with a swing of his knife, he cut off the golden apple. Ah! The fruit let out a shrill cry after its root was cut off. Then, it quickly lost its vitality and became motionless as if its head had been cut off. I wonder if this potion formula is really used. It's getting harder and harder to increase vitality now. After traceless time, Heath continued to consume other materials and potions such as life water and the immortality potion to increase his vitality. At this moment, his vitality had already exceeded 400 years old. However, after spanning more than 400 years, it suddenly became difficult to continue to increase his vitality. In these 2 years, his vitality had basically not increased, but only weakened. Hopefully, it will bring good news. Heath kept the golden apple into his dimensional pocket, then he immediately got up and headed back without any delay. Just as he was about to return home, he suddenly stopped after taking a few steps, and his gaze turned towards a direction in the forest. Heath raised his eyebrows. Is there someone there? His sharp hearing allowed him to clearly distinguish that there was a faint sound of footsteps and at the same time, there was a faint spiritual fluctuation coming from that direction. It seemed that the person who came over was his own kind. Chapter 174, Coming. Heath quickly chanted a syllable and quickly entered the invisible state. Not long after, 2 apprentices walked over from the other side. There were a total of 2 apprentices walking over, a man and a woman. They were both young, and they looked back in panic, as if they were hiding from something. Vaguely, they could still hear their terrified voices. The female apprentice said, "Charles, what should we do next?" The male apprentice said decisively, "Go to the Dark Wizard region." The female apprentice's expression changed. "What?" The male apprentice said, "Do you think we have a choice, Rowling? Even if I become a dark wizard, I don't want to go to a place like the bloody battlefield. There's no way we can come back from there." At this point, the male apprentice seemed to have thought of something terrifying and could not help but shiver. Heath, who was hiding in the dark, could not help but become curious. Judging from their spiritual force, they were both advanced apprentices and were at the peak level. What was it that made the 2 of them so afraid? Just as Heath was surprised, an extremely strong spiritual force suddenly swept over. This spiritual force was not inferior to his, and was even slightly above his. After 10 years of unremitting efforts, Heath had already possessed the strength of an intermediate stage wizard. Those above him could only be a late stage wizard, or even a peak stage wizard. Heath's expression changed slightly, and he immediately became alert. At the same time, with a whoosh, a cloud of black smoke flew over from afar and landed in front of the 2 apprentices. After landing, the smoke immediately transformed into a human figure. It was an elderly male wizard. He looked to be in his 60s or 70s. He had a hunchbacked figure, a curved aquiline nose, a face like tree bark, and a grey-black cloak wrapped around his body. What was worth Heath's attention was that there was a strange emblem on the chest of the wizard. It was a staff and a crown that overlapped each other. Heath was stunned. The Tower of Order. There was no wizard in the entire West Coast who did not know about this emblem. It was the supreme ruler of this land, the Tower of Order. Heath frowned. Why are they here? The Tower of Order was obviously the object that the 2 apprentices were hiding from. When the old wizard appeared, the 2 apprentices who were running immediately froze on the spot as if they had been petrified. The old wizard looked at the 2 of them and mocked with a contemptuous expression. "You 2 little things are quite brave. You actually dared to run away while I was resting. Is this how your masters usually teach you? The two apprentices' faces instantly turned pale. They both prostrated on the ground with their foreheads pressed against the ground. The male apprentice cried, Lord Lavras, we are just two apprentices. Please spare us. We are not qualified to go to the bloody battlefield. We are just two cowards. The old wizard replied, whether we are qualified or not is not up to you or me. Your names are on the list. I have to bring you back. I gave you a chance to cooperate, but if you don't listen to my advice, then there's nothing I can do. As he spoke, he stretched out his skinny palm and pointed in the direction of the two apprentices. A dark green flame suddenly ignited in his palm. The flame shot out like a line and instantly devoured the two apprentices. After being devoured, the apprentices' bodies began to twist, transform, and shrink. In an instant, they turned into two little mice. It was something that wizards were used to, malicious shape-shifting spell. The old wizard then raised his hand and waved in that direction. The two little mice immediately flew into his hand. He then took out a cage and threw the two little mice into it. He held the cage and curled his lips. You guys don't know what's good for you. I gave you the opportunity to become a wizard, yet you didn't treasure it. The land of darkness is really getting worse with each generation. After saying that, the old wizard put away the cage in his hand. Then, he glanced in Heath's direction. Did he find me? Heath raised his eyebrows and concentrated. However, the terrible thing did not happen. The old wizard seemed to have unconsciously glanced in his direction. After taking a look, he quickly withdrew his gaze, turned into a cloud of smoke, and flew away. Just as Heath heaved a sigh of relief, a voice came from afar. Your summoner isn't me, but you're also on the list. Make your preparations early. Heath was startled. He frowned as he looked in the direction the old wizard had left. This is... What's going on? 2 days later, in the kingdom of Navi, in Kalaru city. After gathering the golden apple, Heath didn't delay at all as he returned to the temple of Kalaru. Good day, Lord Heath. Good morning, Bishop Heath. It was only dawn, but the temple was already busy. Worshippers, prayers, priests, and other clergy came and went into the temple. After 10 years of development, the Church of Light founded by Heath had begun to take shape and had become the ruler of the kingdom of Navi. Of course, if one wanted to truly sit on this land of resources and become a true wizard lord, they still needed the certification of the ruler of darkness. However, that was after the end of the war. There was no need to think about these things now. Bishop Heath, Bishop Paul wants to pay you a visit. He asked me to ask when you are free. A knight of the church blocked Heath's way and delivered Paul's visiting card. Heath accepted the gilded letter and replied, ask him to come in the afternoon. I have something to take care of in the morning. Pausing for a moment, he asked, do you know what it is? The holy knight said, I heard from Sir Paul that it should be related to the plague in Cavalim. Cavalim was a city under Heath's rule. For some reason, the plague had suddenly started. Heath raised his eyebrows. Has it not been dealt with yet? The holy knight said, yes, I heard that our clergy has encountered some trouble over there. Sir Paul said that he will discuss it with you when he meets you. Heath said, I understand. Then, he returned to the laboratory in the side hall to prepare for the next batch of potions. However, just as he walked into the laboratory, Heath's brows suddenly furrowed. At this moment, 2 figures appeared in his laboratory. One was a man and the other was a woman. They were looking at the table full of bottles and jars. Heath immediately became alert and questioned, who are you? He could sense that both of them were not weak. They were at least at the level of wizards. In order to not be disturbed during the experiment, Heath had specially set up a barrier in the laboratory. It was not until Heath stepped into the room that the 2 of them sensed his arrival. After hearing Heath's question, the 2 of them stopped what they were doing. The male wizard looked at Heath and asked, Heath Noen. After a pause, he took out a badge and pinned it on his chest. It was a badge with a scepter and a crown interwoven together. Tower of Order, he said bluntly, nice to meet you. I'm Observer Celis. Chapter 175, Edict. Heath was stunned. Tower of Order. He frowned and asked, what's the matter? The wizard named Celis raised his right hand, and a firebird rose from his palm. The firebird flapped its wings and flew into the sky, turning into a sheepskin scroll. On the seal of the scroll was the seal of the Tower of Order. Celis said with a condescending tone, "We are here to convey the order of the Tower of Order to you. We are recruiting you as a wizard warrior of our west coast to the bloody battlefield. Salute and accept the summons." Heath was unmoved. Celis asked, "What is it?" Heath said, "I don't know what you are talking about, and I'm not interested in your edict." After all, he was a wizard now, and he had to protect his face. How could they show off in his room without permission and order him to do things? The witch standing next to Celis was a little angry. "You want to refuse to be summoned?" Heath sneered. "What a joke! What status do you have? What terms do you want me to be summoned?" The rule of the wizard world was the same as that of the human world. What they believed in was, "I am the ruler, not under a ruler." Although the Tower of Order was the highest ruler of the entire West Coast, it had nothing to do with Heath legally, so it had no right to directly give him orders. The witch's face suddenly darkened. "You don't have a choice." As she spoke, she raised her right hand and a ball of blue light flashed in her palm, immediately forming a blue ball. Faintly, a strong fluctuation of ice element swept out from it. The witch immediately threw out the black ball in her hand. In addition to the ice element, this ball seemed to have been infused with a space spell. As soon as it was thrown out, it instantly appeared in front of Heath. In an instant, Heath felt an extremely strong cold current enveloping him, causing his entire body to freeze inch by inch. Heath's gaze turned cold. "You're shameless." As he spoke, his gaze focused forward, and a black shadow instantly appeared in front of the witch. Standing not far away, Celis seemed to have sensed something and hurriedly shouted, "Tina, be careful." However, at the same time, Heath had already completed the substitution with the black shadow. At the same time, he pulled out the cross sword at his waist and slashed directly at the witch's head. The blade of the sword seemed to have been covered with a layer of golden light. Just as the witch was about to be hit by the sword, there was a wave of spatial fluctuations around her body. Then, she suddenly disappeared from where she was and appeared more than 10 meters away. Heath slash missed, and he could not help but become alert. Spatial fluctuations? This was a medium-level wizard? But the spiritual fluctuations don't seem like it. Maybe he used some kind of spatial magic tool. No wonder they could sneak into my laboratory. He analyzed in secret. At the same time, Celis and Tina were also looking at Heath, their eyes filled with shock. Due to his deliberate concealment, Celis and Tina had not been able to determine Heath's actual strength. However, when he cast the spell just now, they immediately recognized that he was definitely a wizard of the same level as them. However, 10 years ago, when the Underdark Rebellion had just begun, they had recorded Heath. At that time, he was clearly just an apprentice. In just 10 years, he had already advanced to a wizard? Moreover, Celis' gaze fell on the golden radiance on Heath's blade. What was that? Why did it make him feel a faint sense of danger? Seeing that Heath still had signs of wanting to make a move, Celis quickly said, "Sir, we have no ill intentions." His tone was obviously less arrogant, but more equal and respectful. Seeing that, Heath did not continue to make a move. After all, he was a member of the Tower of Order. He just needed to show people that he was not someone to be trifled with. There was no need to make such a powerful enemy. Celis bowed and apologized first. "We were rude before. I hope you will forgive us." Heath shrugged and did not reply. Celis was not angry. The wizard world was a world that believed in strength. He had just shown enough strength to talk to them on equal terms. Celis continued, "It is true that we were rude about the edict. We will go back and redraft it and let the ruler of the Underdark convey it to you. Then, farewell." With that, he retreated with the witch beside him. Heath stopped them. "Wait." Celis turned around. "Is there anything else, Your Excellency?" Heath asked, "What is this bloody battlefield that you mentioned just now?" He recalled the scene in the forest. They were both from the Tower of Order, and it seemed that they were also here about this bloody battlefield. Celis was stunned. "You don't know?" Heath shook his head. Tina, who was beside him, tugged at the corner of his shirt. "He's just a muggle." Celis suddenly understood. If they were just ordinary apprentices, no one would explain for them, so it was natural that they did not know. He explained, "If you want to know, why don't you directly ask your ruler?" Heath asked, "There is no ruler in the Underdark now." Celis shook his head. "Who is the ruler and whether there is a ruler or not is not up to the wizards of the Underdark. The Tower of Order has admitted that the ruler of the Underdark is the ruler of the Underdark. Heath was stunned. These words were worth pondering. Celis said, "Then we will take our leave first." After saying that, the two left. Heath looked in the direction where the two of them left, not saying a word. What was this bloody battlefield? Was he going to return to Shadow Tower? After parting with the two wizards of the Tower of Order, Heath immediately went into the preparation of the magic potion. The name of this magic potion was Eternal Water. It was found in the ancient house of his family by a young noble of the Kingdom of Navi. It was said that the ancestor of that young noble had once followed a wizard. After discovering this potion formula, he immediately handed it over to the church, which then handed it over to Heath. Similar things happened everywhere in the past 10 years. After 10 years of nurturing, Heath's holy church had truly become the supreme ruler of this land. Under his orders, anything related to magic would be handed over to the church at the first instance, and then taught to him. Relying on this mechanism, he had obtained many good things in the past 10 years, some of which had even reached the rank of a wizard. There was nothing much to say about potion making. After 10 years of constant contact, Heath was already very skilled in this aspect. It only took him 2 days to successfully complete the Eternal Water. The effect was better than he had expected. It gave him a total of 28 years of life force bonus. Adding the previous 400 years, Heath's life force had already reached 428 years. He was not far from the limit of the wizard level. The matter of life force upgrade came to an end temporarily. After upgrading his life force, the next day, Heath welcomed another unexpected guest.